Welcome to Thursday on the AM show. And of course, that was my colleague Isaac Kofi. Government obviously needs financial oxygen to breathe, but we all know how we ended up here. And that, in fact, is on our radar as we get into our big stories this morning. But even before that, former Member of Parliament for Kumbungu, Ras Mubarak, will be our guest for the news review. And then when we hit the big stories, number one on the chopping board, we're going back to what you just heard. A majority of the banks in Ghana have recorded losses, and this was from last year's audited financial statement, the audited financial statement for 2022. It is a direct result of the domestic debt exchange program on their operations. They are bleeding. Today, we'll discuss this issue with Professor Lord Mensah, lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, his counterpart from the University of Cape Coast School of Business, Sairam Kawo, and of course, Dr. Michael Ayamga, an economist at the University for Development Studies. All of them join us on that. But talking money, the caterers under the school feeding program say they will not yield to any intimidation to resume work. We brought you that story yesterday. Well, today we continue because for about 3 weeks, the caterers have withdrawn their services in demand for payment of arrears and an increase of the cooking grant per child from 97 pesos to 3 cedis. They want leadership of the program to desist from issuing threats in addressing their challenges. We've got this on our chopping board as well. And finally, you may have heard of the entire situation about Ghanaian students in Sudan and what is happening there. Well, today we'll have an engagement with the National Union of Ghana Students. So far, according to government, 77 students have been removed from Sudan, so to speak. They'll be transported to the Ethiopian border town of Metema, where they will be received by Ghana Embassy officials and processed for home. We'll be bringing you details of that as we delve into that all-important matter as well. But the show is all about you. So just stay with us and share your thoughts with us via the live stream and at the tail end where we activate the phone lines. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. This is the AM show. We'll be right back with the news. It's time for the news now. Let's start on the international front, so to speak. And President Akufo Addo says Ghana remains resolute and uncompromising in her position against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. According to him, Ghana, as a founding member of the non-aligned movement, had consistently resisted the idea that the big powers had the freedom to do whatever they liked on the planet. He says Ghana has never accepted that principle, whether it was with the Americans, Russians, or any other country. At a joint news conference with the visiting Austrian Prime Minister to Ghana, President Akufo Addo said Ghana would stand against any aggressor seeking to use its power to eliminate the existence of any country.
This is also centered on the effects of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, coupled the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic are having across the world. Undeniably, they have put countries, communities, and households across Africa and indeed across the world in precarious situations and are threatening to derail the development progress in African countries in particular. The reason why Ghana led the fight for the liberation of the African continent from colonialism and imperialism and became one of the 5 initiators of the historic non-aligned movement is because of our history, which has always been against great power domination of the affairs of the world. It is this same principle that led us to vote in the United Nations General Assembly in favor of the motion condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it is a position that we will continue to hold. Great powers of whatever ilk, including friendly ones, trampling on small nations is not something we welcome. And within our modest means, we will register our disapproval of that.
Well, now, government is insisting it is on course in protecting Ghana's forests and water resources, despite coming under intense public criticism and condemnation for its handling of illegal mining in the wake of the Professor Frimpong Boateng report. The Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Abu-Jinapor, says government is leading the fight with enough transparency and integrity to deal with the Galamsey menace. There's more in this report.
As you know, the ministry has been rolling out a two-pronged approach in restoring the degraded landscape of our country and restoring the forest cover of our country. First is protecting the forest reserves of our country. And second is engaging in this aggressive afforestation and reforestation. The protection will mean making sure that the various forest reserves of our country are safeguarded, are protected from attack of deforestation, agricultural expansion, cocoa expansion, illegal mining, all the factors which result in forest degradation and deforestation, wildfires and the rest. The Forestry Commission has put in place adequate measures, a plethora of measures to ensure that we protect the forest reserves of our country. And I want to say to the Ghanaian people that whatever it takes to protect the forest reserves of our country, government is putting in place all kinds of measures. In fact, as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a retreat and the Forestry Commission briefed Cabinet on the measures that are being taken to protect the forest reserves of our country. And we're going to continue. We're going to continue to roll out these measures to make sure that these forest reserves are cordoned off from attack or from the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation. Is that you continue to have the assurance of government and the ministry that we are discharging our mandate with integrity and transparency, with candor, and doing all we can to ensure that we keep our environment, we keep our landscape intact, and the integrity of our forest reserve is not compromised. And as you know, the various measures the ministry is put in place to deal with these matters are matters of public knowledge, and these are matters I've spoken to over and over again. And we're very focused on that, and we don't want to be distracted. The forestry sector is one aspect of the mandate of the ministry, but as you quite rightly pointed out, the forestry sector has a relationship with the mining sector, as the mining sector has a relationship with the forestry sector. So whilst we are taking these measures to green our country, we are equally taking measures to protect the forest reserves of our country. And that is the responsibility the President gave me from March 2021 to date, and I've been working hand in glove with the various stakeholders in the ministry, in government, and beyond to make sure that we discharge the assignment given to us by the President, and that's exactly what we are focused on doing.
Well, now, Senior Environmental Health Officer of the Accra Metropolitan Assembly is warning food operators without health certificates that they will face prosecution if they fail to undergo health screening. This was after he made a surprise visit to some selected restaurants at the Rawlings Park. Inspector Joseph Asetanga indicated that there had been increasing cases of food-related diseases in the Greater Accra region. Prince Sotuansa was with the team and came through with this report.
On today's Clean Ghana campaign trail, the sanitation team paid a surprise visit to restaurants at the Rawlings Park in the Central Business District of Accra.
Our purpose of visit here today is to see how you prepare your food, handling, storage, the general environment of your restaurant. We have been here several times, and today I'm sure you will make us happy that we have been visiting you. So the standards that we ask you to do, I'm sure you've done everything put everything in order.
This was a follow-up visit to restaurants the health and sanitation team had previously visited.
Our work is a routine exercise. Once a food industry, we are not supposed to leave the place within 2 weeks or 3 weeks without visiting the place. And every time we visit a restaurant, all the findings that we come across, whether defects, whether good, whatever findings we come across, we make recommendations to the proprietor that per our next visit that we are coming, we want to come to see that you comply with the directive in the notice.
One of the restaurants they visited was lauded for its adherence to the AMA health and sanitation regulations.
So maintain the standards that you put up here, and I recommend that you see the doors. The next time we will come, I want to see that either you paint it with oil paint or you change it. If you can't change, paint it so that they will look more attractive.
Speaking to JoyNews, the senior environmental officer, Inspector Joseph Asitanga, issued a stern warning to food operators without health certificates that they risk being prosecuted.
Restaurant, whatever product that you are producing that is consumable must reach out to AMA, Metro Public Health, and undergo this screening and test to obtain the certificate. Or else, if we come to your food industry, whatever type of food that you are preparing, provided it is consumable product, and you don't have this card, we will match you to our law court and prosecute you accordingly, because it is a very important requirement that determines the fitness of health before you handle food.
Meanwhile, owner of All Joy Restaurant, Mary Barr, also urged food vendors to also respect rules governing food safety.
Car park, you see people really cooking with fire and all that, you see. So it's the way AMA checks us. We think that they should be on them too. If they feel that they are supposed to be where they are, then they too have to face, this vigorous kind of screening.
The senior environmental health officer of the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, Inspector Joseph Asitanga, urged food operators to prioritize the health and safety of their customers by ensuring that all employees possess valid health certificates. A report by Prince Owusu Ansah read to you.
Let's stay on the subject of food, because some schools in the Ashanti region have been recording low attendance since caterers boycotted cooking for the pupils. The caterers under the school feeding program have in the past 3 weeks embarked on an industrial action demanding unpaid arrears and an increase in the feeding grant. Now, some parents and school authorities say the absence of the caterers is affecting school attendance. Nana Addo reports.
The caterers at a recent press conference said they would not be intimidated to resume cooking for pupils in basic schools. Love News checks, however, indicate some of the caterers are returning to cook. Headmaster of the State Experimental Basic School 2, Solomon Osei Kankam, says the absence of the caterers had a negative consequence on school attendance. He says students who depended on the regular school meal resisted attending classes.
As you can see, they are at work now cooking for the children. Before then, the children, when they come to school, because most of them depend on their food, when they come in the afternoon, you see some of them complaining of hunger. We did advise them to bring money to school to buy food until the caterers come back. But some of them will come to school complaining that they don't have money. And it was actually having effect on our teaching and learning.
The headmaster pleaded with the government to liaise with the caterers to prevent any further strike.
Now, because of this school feeding, it is now part of the system. So if that is out, the school will not be that attractive to the children any longer. So we are hoping and praying that the government will be able to come to the aid of the caterers so that work will go on smoothly. Everything to be fine for us.
Some parents also called on the government to ensure the caterers fully return to post.
As a mother, I wake up early for work, so it's disturbing to find my kids go to school without the caterers not cooking. Government must consider doing something urgently about this. There are enormous challenges considering the strike action. Government must pay his debt and ensure the caterers return to schools to cook. You promised to feed the students, so do so. If you stop cooking, it becomes a problem for parents for as long as it remains a government policy. Government must do something as soon as possible.
For JoyNews, Nana Addo reporting.
In our next story, the National Peace Council is entreating Ghanaians, especially followers of the major political parties, to be circumspect in reacting to intemperate statements made by politicians. Chairman of the Council, Reverend Dr. Ernest Edu-Jemfi, said the actions of politicians were only games played on the minds and emotions of Ghanaians. Emmanuel Bright-Kweku has more.
The past weeks have seen a back and forth from the camps of the National Democratic Congress and the New Patriotic Party on comments made by Agriculture Minister Brian Champong. A statement the NDC described as reckless and treasonable, but some members of the NPP disagree. The National Peace Council is alarmed by the spate of incendiary comments in the country.
Ghana was placed as the most peaceful country in West Africa.
Chairman for the council, Reverend Dr. Ernest Edujemfi, says Ghanaians must not fall to the deceitful utterances of politicians as they mostly act to win party favors. He spoke to JoyNews at the 60th Annual Ministers' Conference of the Ghana Baptist Convention held in Accra.
We don't only look at Brian's statement, but we've looked at all the parties and we've categorized all the things they've said from January. We place it before them so that they will understand that we are not dealing with one particular issue, but we are dealing with several of them, so that sometimes some of them appear to be a reaction to another person's statement and we are trying to outdo another, we are trying to do all those things. But when you come to closed door to see how we sit with the party, they talk as friends, as if they are family members. So we appeal to them. They themselves said, we can sit here talking nicely. As soon as you put camera on us, we start misbehaving. They admitted, but some of them admitted again that it looks like those who shout more, who make a lot of noise, are given political appointments. And so it emboldens them. That makes them feel like I can do it because I'll be rewarded. They are playing a game. And sometimes they play on our emotions, we react, we overreact, and some people get into trouble. And even some die and are killed, So the public must understand that it's not everything that the politicians say that we have to follow. We need to be circumspect.
Reverend Dr. Edujemfi says many social users hide behind their platforms to make unsavory comments with the potential of incensing the public. He charged the public to stand up against such abusive and hateful comments.
Everybody is concerned about what is happening on social media. The insults, the calling of names, all kinds of things, and inciting the public, as it were, against individuals. Recently, we heard something where somebody was saying that we know where you live, we know where your properties are, we will come after you. Once you tread into that space, we are going overboard. Let's argue on what we can do as a party when I come into power, what I am offering to the people, what is it that we intend doing. That is what Ghanaians want to hear. It is not how we insult people. There's a need for the public to rise up and let people know that we can't continue like this in a country like Ghana.
Meanwhile, the Ghana Baptist Convention has declared its opposition against any attempt to legalize LGBTQ activities in the country. While the church is against ill treatment meted out to homosexuals, President of the conference, Reverend Dr. Charles Owusu-Ampofo, says the legalization of the act is a threat to procreation.
We don't think that we could say that everything is somebody's right and therefore should be applied. I mean, we all have different levels of rights. Do we apply all levels of right? No, because some rights in the end is destructive. We cannot destroy the fabric of the society. If two men get married, where is the issue of procreation? The church is by this not suggesting that people who unfortunately have found themselves in this situation should be harassed, killed, murdered, and what have you. We will not vote for that.
The 60th anniversary of the church is slated to be climaxed in November. For JoyNews, Emmanuel Bright-Kweku reporting.
It's a wrap for the news. Up next, the news review with former Kumbungu MP Ras Mubarak. Stay with us. Well, we have Ras Mubarak, former member of parliament for Kumbungu. He was going back for that seat. He's leading the charge to take the seat back. But whether he will succeed, only time will tell. He's going to contest in that primary. But this is the news review. Time now for us to get into the papers and what they have to share with us this morning. The segment brought to you courtesy of Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. What are they offering you? At least the basics that they are offering, they are telling us to let you know about. Free prostate screening, free fertility screening, all of that for free. All you have to do is go to any of their branches. If you're here in Accra, at Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard. If you are in Kumasi, Kronoma Bwehia, behind the Angel Educational Complex, Tema Community 22. There's also Anaji Estates in Takrade, Techiman Hanswa, and Esiama Enzema. You can reach them on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Ras, a very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you, Benji.
It's good to have you. This is the second time within about a month, right?
Absolutely. See how quickly time flies.
Right. So we've had the month of Ramadan, we've had the Eid, the small one, and there have been a number of developments as well since the last time we interacted. As far as IMF program is concerned, the approval of same. As far as our economy is concerned, now we're being told a lot of the banks from last year, a majority of them, incurred losses on the back of the domestic debt exchange program. That's according to the year's audit financial statement. There have also been those reactions. In fact, today it's something we're talking about. The National Peace Council, which has now come reacting to intemperate statements on the political floor, whether NDC or NPP, and how the masses should react to them. Any quick reactions to any of these thoughts? I mean, stuff that we've missed in between before we get into the papers.
Well, I mean, it's no surprise that the banks have taken a hit, you know, in respect of the domestic debt restructuring. Things aren't going very well for a lot of people, you know, and it's reflected, you know, in the outlook, you know, of the banks, you know, and that gives us cause for worry, because these losses that the banks are continually incurring could as well result in job losses, you know, and given the hardship that we are faced with already, even for people who are in continued employment, is difficult. How much more, you know, those who are not gainfully employed.
Right.
So there are tough times ahead, and we can hope that the government, because the onus really and truly lies on the government to walk the talk. And walking the talk would require for the government to do the necessary things that would bring us back on track, that would reduce excess expenditure that, you know, things that we shouldn't be spending money on, you know, the frills, you know, in government. As we speak, government officials are still traveling out of the country. As we speak, they're still flying, you know, first class, you know, and clearly these are cause for worry, you know, that when we are in dire straits, when we are in so much difficulty, you know, we are not cutting down expenditure to reduce the burden on the poor taxpayer. Whenever the president moves, we still see the long convoys and the rest of it, you know, and I don't see any leadership, you know, in addressing some of these challenges. My biggest fear is the long-term effects. Right. You know, when an economy takes a hit for a long time, you know, its effects on people's livelihood over the years to come are quite devastating, you know, and we all should brace ourselves up for tough times ahead. Now, in respect of the Peace Council's wake-up call, intemperate language.
Why do you find it funny?
Well, I think it's a little late in the day. You know, we have seen instances where they should have stepped in much earlier, and we've seen inertia, you know, on the part of the Peace Council. So I'm really and truly hoping that as we gear towards, the 2024 election, they wouldn't wait till things get to a head, before they do step in to caution people. Because whether we like it or not, this is the only country we have. Whether we like it or not, we've got to make Ghana a great country. It's not a perfect country, all right?
Right.
But it requires for all of us, to do everything within our power. And indeed, no nation is perfect, but all of us would have to put our noses to the grindstone and bring it to the levels that we require. And that would require for institutions such as the Peace Council, not to be firefighters, but to take initiatives, and
so not to be firefighters, but to be preventers of fire, so to speak. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
prevention is cheaper than prevention is cheaper than curing, as they say. So I'm really hoping that they will be up and doing.
Okay.
Now, obviously, we've had a very fantastic holy month of Ramadan for many of us. It's been a month of spiritual cleansing and gearing up for the things ahead. And I think for our own health, it requires for everyone every now and then to actually fast, just to have a feel of what people who come get a 3-square meal a day are going through. And really and truly, it's tough for many Ghanaians struggling up and down the country.
Let's get into the major stories in the newspapers. I'll start with the Daily Graphic, and it says Green Ghana Day, June the 9th. Commission pledges to protect forest resources. I'll be getting into that story. There's also NCA forensic audit to weed out fraudulent SIM registration. 6.17 million cards deactivated, 11.1 million more to go. On page 20, Parliament can't compel EC to adopt guarantor system. That's according to a lawyer. And then Jospon secures $30 million for rice production. You remember that bit about homegrown production and all of that. We'll get into that story. In fact, let's start with it. But on the back page, right before we get there, Adriana pipped Gold Stars to keep top spot. They lost recently, I believe, to Kumasi Asante Kotoko, but now they've come back and they are maintaining their top spot. At least they've opened a 3-point gap at the summit of the league log. And so Adriana Stars, after 28 matches with 50 points, Mediama after same with 47 points. Bichim United after 28 matches as well with 45 points. Asante Kotoko languishes in 5th spot after 27 matches with 42 points. Of course, they can't overtake Brecum Chelsea if they play that match outstanding that they have. Now, let's get back to that story. The Austrian government has provided a $30 million facility to Jospon Group of companies for the expansion of its rice production enterprise in the country. President Nana Addo, who commended the Austrian government for the gesture as he announced it in Accra yesterday, noted that the Jospon Group had already established 16 integrated recycling and compost plants, all through the support of the Austrian government. President Akufo-Addo was speaking at a launch in honor of the Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer, who is on a 3-day official visit to Ghana. And that is the story. I guess this is a facility that has been secured from the Austrian government. We celebrate it and we hope definitely that it yields the sort of results we seek, like the Nigerians have been able to turn the tide when it comes to rice production. Rather than importing, they are growing in their own country. But let's turn to that story on Green Ghana Day, and from there we'll do the story on the EC. I have a lot to say about this Green Ghana initiative, and tomorrow on my Blunt Thoughts, you can expect me to go there. Now, Green Ghana Day, June the 9th, Commission pledges to protect forest resources. And June the 9th has been set aside for Green Ghana Day 2023. The day has been set aside for the planting of various tree types and species, ranging from ornamental to cash crops, shrubs and fruits. The 2023 planting, which is the 3rd consecutive edition of the National Climate Change Reversal Exercise, is targeted at planting 10 million trees across the country. Let me pause there and share a few thoughts with you. Ghana Fool. So we're supposedly going to expend about 2.5 million Ghana cedis, which we don't have in the first place, on this new initiative, or at least this new installment of greening Ghana. It is good to green Ghana, but in the meantime, we owe previous facilitators money we've not paid. So if not paid people, government is indebted, yet we're going to budget another 2.5 million Ghana cedis that we don't have for a new initiative. So it becomes a vicious cycle of debt. Why do we do this? And I have said time and again, how do we account for the other installments of greening Ghana? Accountability in terms of we planted X number of trees. Why survived? We hear in some cases goats chewed our trees. Why survived? And then this is how far they've come. As a sort of proof, this is how much we expended in the past, and these are the gains, for which reason we can build on that and continue this. It's almost as though we continued with initiatives without this step-by-step process. Who does that? And in any case, when I listen to the lands minister, I cannot help but smirk a bit, because you have an initiative like this and you're touting it. Yet just yesterday in the Ghanaian Times newspaper, I think on page 11, we're talking about how we're losing a lot of our, is it Kukrodua, something of the sort, mahogany, okay, odum. In many parts of our country, years ago, we were told that we're losing our forest cover at an alarming rate. So, I mean, while this is good, I don't see it really tackling the problem. There are so many ifs, whys, wheres, whens to answer, and I'm simply not seeing those answers. So, greening Ghana is fantastic, but are we just throwing money down a rabbit hole? That's my question. Parliament can't compel EC to adopt guarantor system. That's according to a lawyer. And constitutional lawyer and former member of Parliament for Kumeu, Yaoban, has criticized the procedure used by Parliament to ensure that the guarantor system becomes one of the means through which a Ghanaian can register to vote. According to him, the legislative body cannot compel the Electoral Commission to include the guarantor system in the constitutional instrument for continuous voter registration, which the electoral body sought to lay before the House. He said, Parliament's suggestion that the EC should include the guarantor system in the CI was at best a recommendation which the electoral management body was not bound by any law to follow. I find this take rather curious, rather interesting, especially on the back of previous happenings, but hey, they are his thoughts. As a former member of Parliament, what do you make about this, and what are your thoughts, Ras, on greening Ghana and what is going into it?
So in terms of greening Ghana, obviously quite exciting. You know, I mean, growing up, you would see a lot of, I'm from the 80s stock, if you know what I mean.
Right.
You would see a lot of neem trees up and down the country. These days, you hardly see, you know, some of these trees. We haven't kept them appropriately.
That's a fair point. I don't even remember the last time I saw a neem tree. That's an interesting point you make.
It doesn't take so much, you know, to keep a neem tree growing. You know, to expend that kind of money, you know, to green Ghana is something that, you know, we would all have to raise questions about, especially when there has not been, you know, accountability on how previous monies have been expended, you know. But a brilliant idea. Indeed, it is a duty on all of us, you know, to ensure that our country is appropriately greener, especially in light of, you know, the challenges we're facing with the climate.
Right.
We can't, you know, overemphasize the importance of planting more and more trees, just so that, one, it has its own beautification effects, you know, and there's no doubt that trees beautify, you know, our society. And then also you have to look at the impact on our environment. And indeed, in the face of emerging climate challenges, this is something that ought to be done. But of course, there's got to be accountability. In my own area in Kumbungu, I haven't seen, you know, much greenery, as far as this project, is concerned. You would expect that in every district, in every corner of the country, young people, older people would be encouraged, to get involved. But this is also not something entirely for government. It behoves on all of us, to plant little trees and flowers in our respective, places of abode and schools. This day and age, you go to the schools and even, the whole place is sakura, so to speak. You don't have any. Go to all of these big schools private schools in Accra. You don't see much greenery. It has to start from the schools. It has to start from the homes. So that kids learning at school would begin to absorb the importance of planting trees and looking after these trees. It's one thing planting the trees. Is another looking after the trees to ensure that they grow to the stages that we all require for them to grow to. So yes, let's have an account of how the previous monies was expended, and then we can talk about additional debt. I don't know whether you would want me to have a bite on the...
Yes, go ahead. The lawyer's take on the Electoral Commission and the new CI, or the CI, so to speak.
As we in the journalism profession say, comment is free, facts are sacred. Facts are that constitutional bodies have every right to present bills to Parliament for approval. That right is within Parliament. As a matter of fact, Parliament has, the mandate to tear apart any bill that comes before it and make insertions, make deletions, make additions, and you also would have to look at, the damage that not including the guarantee system would do for our country. We are at a stage where we are told that the Ghana card would have to be literally, the main document, for acquiring EC card, Electoral Commission voting cards. How many Ghanaians have the Ghana card? In my own constituency in Kumbungu, people can hardly even have access to the Ghana card. People live in...
Well, per the last reports that I saw, there was also facilitated some about 100 million Ghana cedis not too long ago, though we're looking at quite a huge debt that the Electoral Commission had. Part of that has been paid. Some cards that were in the process were released to the National Identification Authority. There is quite a chunk of Ghanaians that have the Ghana card. But the reality too that there is another chunk in the millions that do not have it. And I want to believe the concentration in some areas is more than others, which is why there is a bit of a concern about disenfranchisement by way of the Ghana card.
Benjamin, Ghana is beyond Accra and Kumasi and Takoradi and Tamale.
That's exactly the point I am making.
There are still a number of people who do not have access, and we would be remiss to disenfranchise these millions of Ghanaians of a constitutional right to vote. And as I said, the inclusion of the guarantee system has always been a part of our electoral system. And I don't see why the Electoral Commission would want to remove that. When it comes to Parliament, I do believe that sincerely, even members from the majority would do the right thing to ensure that as many Ghanaians as possible are not disenfranchised, from getting an EC card. But as I said, it's this comment. Parliament is clothed with the necessary powers to rip to shreds whatever bill that comes its way, to make insertions and deletions and additions. And I do believe that when we get there on the floor of the House, those insertions and deletions would be made. As to whether or not there would be consensus, because we tend to be steeped so much in petty partisanship, where we fail to look at the overall national interest. I would be so sad if this is reduced to MPP, NDC, where a certain group of people would say we don't want the guarantee system included, and others saying we want the guarantee system to be included. There comes a time in our lives when, we would have to put the country first. And on the issue of inserting the guarantee system, it would be one of those issues that we require, and when I say we, I mean we the people, require, our members of parliament from both sides of the aisle, to do the.
Well, let's get into the Ghanaian Times newspaper now. Green Ghana Day targets planting 10 million trees nationwide. My charge to Mr. President, my charge to the Lands and Natural Resources Minister, Mr. Jinapo, is that moving forward, 10 million trees, let's be accountable and say, oh, we planted 10 million trees, and of that number, this survived, this is the value, and we're going to protect them, maintain this, and maintain that. That's the only way to go. But this bit about a lack of accountability and then just every year going back and expending our taxpayers' money cannot be anything but, I'll leave that adjective out because I don't think it's a pleasant one. But Veep woos Austrian investors to Ghana, applauds 34 million euro Jospon Group and Compec partnership. Then President nominates Justice Mrs. Tokonu as new Chief Justice. There's been a bit of a ping pong back and forth on that matter. Was it going to be Yoni Kolendi? Was it going to be Mrs. Tokonu? But in the end, it appears Mrs. Tokonu prevailed, and she's been penciled for that position, penciled down for that position. But I think we've spoken about all of those issues. I'll give you a bite on the Chief Justice narrative. She would be the third now since 2007. We had Georgina Theodora Wood, we had Sophia Kufu, and now we are likely going to have Mrs. Tokonu, Gertrude Tokonu. I'll highlight the story and then allow you to react to that together with anything you have to say about Justice Tokonu. Now, mass SIM registration exercise, NCA to block 11 million SIMs at the end of May 2023. Where's page 19? Let's look for you. Let's find you very quickly. All right, there you are. So more than 11 million active subscriber identity modules will, by the end of May 2023, be deactivated if the owners of such SIMs fail to register by the said date, the National Communications Authority has warned. The authority said only Ghanaians on national duty outside Ghana, foreign diplomats, and refugees who are exempted from the SIM registration exercise would have their SIMs not deactivated by the said date. The Director General of the NCA, Mr. Joe Anochi, who disclosed this at a news conference in Accra yesterday to brief the public on the progress so far made on the mass SIM re-registration exercise, said by the end of the deadline, subscribers who did not genuinely have Ghana cards would have to prove that they did not have Ghana cards to prevent their SIMs from being deactivated. Your thoughts?
We're still talking about SIM re-registration and the fact that many Ghanaians do not have, Ghana card to have their SIM registered. There are still concerns about people using other persons' Ghana cards, to register SIM cards. These are all things that ought to be sorted out by the NCA, and let's see how it goes. I mean, you would remember that I was part of a group that was hugely opposed to the, the way the NCA was carrying things, the SIM registration exercise, simply because it wasn't done in a manner that provided dignity to Ghanaians, and also in a manner, that was seamless. So, with time, I believe they can improve on the re-registration exercise.
Right.
But some of us are still of the opinion that we have to fight crime, and in fighting crime, we must not commit an illegality. The Minister for Communication has still not, gotten the necessary legislative backing in Parliament, as far as I'm concerned, to embark on this SIM registration exercise. Now, on the CJ's nomination, she's, first of all, not the senior most person, at the Supreme Court, but, I mean, over the years, it's always fallen on the senior most person to be appointed Chief Justice until recent times. but you can understand why she's been appointed. Obviously, Justice Doche would have been the senior most, but he's also going on retirement, I'm told, in a couple of months or so. Anytime a woman is included in leadership, it is fantastic because they come to the table with different ideas. They come to the table with a new way of looking at things. So I'm excited about the inclusion of women in leadership. She's a staunch Christian from the Central Region. She's got a very distinguished, career both in private practice, and at the bar, at the High Court, and subsequently at the Appeals Court. You remember she was appointed to the Appeals Court in 2014 and subsequently elevated to the Supreme Court. She's very solid, no doubt. Now, people, however, have concerns about her temperament, and I've spoken to a lot of senior.
What is your concern about the temperament? And you also said, you made mention of the fact that she's been nominated, and we know why. Why do you feel that is?
No, when I say we know why, I mean, given the fact that the two senior most justices would have been, going on retirement very soon as well, and it would not really and truly appoint somebody who it will not be exciting.
Obviously, who is about to go over the hill, right?
On retirement, so that is exciting. More so because she's woman, so she comes to the table with a new approach to things. But the big elephant
on that point, I find it curious sometimes when we talk about because she's a woman. I mean, she's qualified. She has everything. Is it important whether or not she's a woman?
No, it's exciting when we're talking about inclusion, and we live in a macho society. We live in a society where men are grabbing all the topmost position. So if we have women, qualified women who are equally coming to the table with their own expertise and experiences, that makes it the more exciting. It encourages the young lady in Kumbungu or elsewhere up and down the country who may be looking up to, women for inspiration. So that's the context within which I make the point. But the question as to whether or not she can clean up the sullen image of the judiciary. And the judiciary, like the police and other institutions of state, have come under a lot of fire, for all manner of corruption. So she would have a lot of things in her intrigue to deal with.
In other words, she'll have her work cut out for her, right?
Have her work cut out for her. One of them would be doing things to clean up the image of the judiciary.
Right.
As to whether or not she can assert her independence is something that we would have to see. They say give a man power, a woman power, and you'll see their true colors. We've seen how His Excellency the President has failed to show leadership in tackling some of the big things like Galamsey that he promised. So it's always good when people are given an opportunity, but as to whether or not they can deliver, would be something we leave to time. But I am looking forward to her tenure. There are concerns from senior lawyers whose arena is the Supreme Court about her temperament as well. People believe, for those that I've spoken to, that sometimes she talks down on lawyers who appear before her. So I believe it's something
do you have any proof of that?
No, I mean, I'm not a practicing lawyer.
So who are these who have shared this with you? Lawyers?
I would not want to put their names out.
Oh, no, not names, but I mean, are these lawyers who shared that with you?
These are senior lawyers whose arena is the Supreme Court. I've spoken about six senior lawyers, from both sides.
And all of them say the same thing. They corroborate this.
They say very good things about her. The fact that she's qualified, she punches above her weight, but also the fact that she talks down on lawyers sometimes. But of course, the position of Chief Justice is administrative. The devil is in the detail when it comes to administering justice, when it comes to dealing with matters that come before the Supreme Court. So,
all right,
we will have to see how she navigates her way through the complex web of having to deal with high-profile political cases. And
she has her own trajectory if you go and look at the rulings she's delivered over time. But unfortunately, we have to make tracks in about a minute. So if you could just quickly, have you wrapped with that? So we can just look at two stories very quickly from two different papers. Very quickly.
We can look at those stories.
Staying in the courts, the Daily Guide has a number of stories we've looked at. Otumfuo clocks 24 on the golden stool. Congratulations to him. And 3 Takwa gold robbers busted. But I wanted to stay in the courts and do the story. Sunyani High Court jurors have gone on strike over unpaid allowances for transportation, court attendance, and sitting. The strike has resulted in the suspension of all high-profile cases in the Bono region, including murder, rape, and robbery, among others. The jurors claimed that their allowances had been in arrears since March 2022, prompting their strike. And then the Business Finder newspaper, Valco's rebound continues. Remember last year, the strike, the industrial action at Valco and everything, and how crucial Valco is to our national life. So at least the story says Valco's rebound continues with the new leadership. Quick reactions to this as we wrap.
Well, we would have to, when I say we, the state would have to release the necessary resources, to the courts to do their work. Because you're talking about, administration of justice.
Right.
You don't want a situation where somebody else will find transport for jurors and then the course of justice will be perverted, So, and I know for a fact, having, been a member of parliament, having served in government, that the releases tend to delay a lot, to these critical institutions. And it doesn't help in the delivery of their services, to the public. So let's do what is right to ensure that they get the necessary releases and timely to be able to do their work. Of course, whilst we talk about Valco, we can't, forget the fact that today is the 51st anniversary of the passing of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He should be turning in his grave, looking at how badly we've managed everything, we've mismanaged everything that he's bequeathed us, and it would be nice if Valco can be resuscitated, if it can be revived, to provide the necessary services. In all of this, Benjamin, in all of this, what we are failing to do is to have leaders who are actually leaders. More often, we tend to elect talkative and politicians. Politicians don't care about the next generation. They care about the next elections.
Is that a general statement? You're a politician too. Is that a general statement?
I'm a politician, and I can tell you about for a fact that majority of the politicians make the few of us who are in it for the public good look very bad. And if politicians are providing the necessary leadership, if they are concerned about, the next generation, we wouldn't have to talk about things like planting more trees, because it will be a given. We wouldn't have to talk about issues like Galamsey as it is now.
Right. I just have to do this and give you some 30 seconds to react because of the comment that comes through. But there's this one as well. Folks, look, so there's a post on Twitter about someone finding a new Chief Justice nominee, if you like. Once she said that she wanted wigs and suits gone. This has been a topical issue, back and forth. She is said to be somewhat conservative. We'll see what that shapes into when she becomes Chief Justice. Will we have wigs and suits gone? Will we use some African prints and go to court? I think, for me, as someone in the system, I think that would be fantastic. I don't know what your quick take is on that. And there's also this. This is what I wanted to. Idrisu Harun says, Honorable, monitoring you live in Gushegu. I wish you victory in your upcoming election. You have some 40 seconds to react to these two, and then we go.
Well, I mean, it will be revolutionary, to see wigs and suits go. But of course, even in the UK, where, we have copied a lot of our codes in law practice, these things are going, so gradually we would have to make do. We would have to, let these relics of colonization, go away,
Okay.
We are 2 weeks away from the parliamentary primaries.
Right.
And we count on your prayers, Benjamin. We are poised for victory on the 13th of May.
Thank you very much, Ras Mubarak. It's interesting how you say counting on my prayers. Ras Mubarak, former member of Parliament for Kumbungu. Of course, we wish you the very best, sir. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. All right, so we'll be going to sports shortly. In one of the papers, they talk about Tottenham Hotspur and that thrashing 6-1 at Newcastle, and how the players have pooled resources and they want to pay back their fans who traveled to watch them. But there's also the whitewashing of Arsenal by Manchester City. The title is slipping away, isn't it? It looks very bad right now. If you're an Arsenal fan, your heart would be in your mouth. But Manchester City has a game in hand. Before we go into sports, though, Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic aided us to bring you this segment. They're offering free prostate screening and free female fertility screening. Here's where you can find them in Accra and other parts of the country. Spintex opposite the Shell signboard in Accra. Kumasi Chronoma here behind the Angel Educational Complex. Takrade Anaji State Tema Community 22. Techiman Hanswa and Esiama Nzema. Reach them on 0244 867-068 or 0274-234-321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Up next, we serve you sports. Stay.
Good morning, it's time for sports here on the AM show. My name is Haruna Mubarak. Let's start with the Ghana Premier League because yesterday was a day to forget for Accra Heart of Oak. This follows a heavy 4-1 defeat at the hands of Tamale City at the Aliu Mahama Stadium. Now, the result means they sink to 6th with 42 points, 8 points behind league leaders, Adriana Stars.
Beautiful cross into the 18-yard box, but went behind. Eduku goes round his marker, still has the opportunity. Eduku goes round past 2, past 3, and he scores!
This is magical. Absolutely magnificent. Imaginable. This is absolutely sumptuous. Brilliant skill from the top scorer for Tamale City, Samson Eduku. Picks up the ball here. And just look at the skill. Went round Anani with cheeky ease. And then when confronted by Robert Sowa, he went past like a hot knife through butter.
Long ball forward. Once again, the flag stays down. Good enough for Tamale City. They are threatening into the 18-yard box. There's a slide push from behind. The referee has pointed to the spot.
Amazing football from Tamale City. And again, it's Nafiu with a lovely pass. And just when Sahadu got into the box.
Will Nana save the day? Samson Eduku increases the goal tally. It's Tamale City 2, Hearts of Oak 0. Offside with that long pass. Goalkeeper comes out, plays the last man standing. Nearly gave the ball away. He's put Caleb under pressure. Tamale City! They are tearing Hearts of Oak apart.
Being embarrassed here. He gets the ball away, but he's not picking a perfect ball. He picks a pass, it's a poor one, and yeah.
Isaac fired from behind, and Accra Hearts of Oak pull 1 goal back from Victor Adu.
Have stopped playing. The Hearts of Oak were coming into the game. Again, Isaac Mensah with that sublime skill. They set it up for Adu, and Adu with a...
This looks good. Aban to Agama, through the middle. Aban! Oh! the advantage and the heat is on for Tamale City. Drilled into the 18-yard box. Oh! That is the icing on the cake. That is the icing on the cake. This definitely will be a goal to remember. That is Isaac Mensah, who drills the last nail into that coffin. Floated in nicely from the left. And look at the header.
The game still goes on. We don't know what may happen at the later part of the season. We just keep our focus, we concentrate. Whatever will be as an error that we weren't able to adapt to, we'll go back home to fix all those errors. Actually, I would say, when it's not your day, it's not your day. But we keep to tell them they should keep supporting, because without them, Hasselhoff also is not Hasselhoff. We are proud of them coming from long journey to support us. We are proud of them. Whatever they make to help the team, we really appreciate their support. So we say thank them.
Better luck next time, Coach.
Thank you, brother.
Oh, sure. Just work in progress. Looking at where we are, there was nothing we could do than to take these 3 points. Knowing very well that we have another important match on Sunday. Tactics worked for us. We plan getting the early goals, which worked perfectly for us. It's business as usual. I'll tap out the good things from here and prepare for Sunday. As I've been saying, we didn't start the season very well. For obvious reasons, for the first time we had 2 playoffs. After that 2 playoffs, we have to play some special championship at Chebi. We came 1 week to the start of the season from Division 1, knowing very well that the difference between Division 1 and the Premier is vast. So that's why we struggled in the first round. We have some experienced players, those who have experienced the Premiership before, tap their experiences, and then that's exactly what we are seeing now. I was certain about that, knowing what my boys can do, and exactly that's what we are doing.
Well, quite a disastrous result for Accra Hearts-of-Oak in terms of their title bid. Now, let's check out the full complement of results that transpired yesterday. So, yeah, Tamale City beating Hearts-of-Oak 4-1. Legon Cities, they emerged 2-0 winners over Accra Lions. Brekum Chelsea, 2-1 winners over Kotoku Royals. King Faisal drew goalless draw with Bechem United. Samatex also won 2-0 against Nswatreman FC. Aduana Stars 2-0 against Gold Stars, and of course Midiama, they won 3-2 against Dreams FC, a 5-goal thriller.
Well, thank you for staying with us on the AM show. And of course, we get into that all-important issue. We told you to be tabling it. The banks, as of last year, had incurred a lot of losses on the back, directly, if you like to speak, of the domestic debt exchange program. And that's according to the annual financial report. We'll be getting you some details of that. And joining us in the studio to analyze that, among others, we have Sayram Kawa. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Coast School of Business. And we also have Professor Lord Mensah, who is with the University of Ghana Business School. But to situate the conversation, we're talking about those situations that led to the banks suffering the losses we have heard that they suffered. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about that, and now it's come to the fore. So how did this happen? And what exactly is going on? Well, to break down the matters further, we have our editor for Joy Business, Nixon Yabua, joining the conversation. Mr. Yabua, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's good to have you.
Well, it's good to be here too.
It's been a while since we
exactly.
we
it's been
did
a while
this.
Since I made some comments on issues currently happening within our dispensation.
Right. Before we get into those issues, Dr. Michael Ayamga as well has joined the conversation. He's an economist at the University for Development Studies. Doc, a very good morning to you as well. You would have to unmute, Doc, when we come back to you.
Good morning, and nice to join you this morning.
Great. So, Sairam Kawa is in the studio here with us as well. Sairam, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you.
Nice meeting.
Today we meet face to face.
Sure.
In living color. Yeah. So I'll come back to you, Mr. Yeboah, or Nixon. I know we're too familiar to be doing Mr. Yeboah things here.
Nixon Yeboah.
What exactly is happening? What has happened to the banking sector, and what does this latest report reveal?
Well, I mean, this was expected because if you look at the bank's exposure to Government of Ghana securities, obviously once we undertake a debt exchange, or I would prefer to call it debt restructuring, it will definitely impact on their business. If you look at the financials that they've released so far, their assets have been impaired largely because of their exposure to GOG securities or bonds. And for me, it's something that is quite problematic because
it's significant, isn't it?
When it happens like that, you should expect that the banks will slow down lending to the private sector and households.
Which has a ripple effect.
Exactly. And that is where the issue is, because if there is low money in circulation, then you should expect that consumer spending will also be a problem. You won't see a lot of financial intermediation within the financial space, and that is where the challenge is. We do not know the number of years that this debt exchange will impact on the banks and consequently the financial sector. But for me, I feel that this has to do with risk issue, because operating as a financial institution, you need to be very careful. You need to monitor the element of financial risk, i.e. interest rates, i.e. currency. And I feel that some of the banks, I do not know, but maybe failed to prioritize financial risk. They thought that government security was absolutely risk-free. But as we speak today, government securities is not risk-free.
One thing we know in business circles, but which has come to the fore now, nothing is risk-free. But of course, we know that lending to government across the world is seen to be one of the easiest ways. We call it low-hanging fruit, right? Exactly. But in this instance, when something like this happens, then it bites hard. Exactly. And then you realize that maybe you miscalculated. Exactly. But you see the likes of Standard Bank, PLC, I mean, listening to the news yesterday, even they, with their cash flows, have been hit, big as they are, established as they are. And we can also talk about the sums of money. I've forgotten what term you used for it, the 400 million, the capitalization.
The minimum capital requirement.
You get it. Now, all of that comes into play because the banks are wobbling.
I was going to speak on that. For now, even though some of the banks have some level of funds in their income surplus item, some may be affected and they would have to recapitalize. And if you look at, if you study the monetary policy report by the central bank in March, they have given the banks a minimum of 3 years to improve their capital. So we call it paid up capital. Okay. And there's a need for more analysis to be done with respect to the financial statement released by the banks. That will give us an indication whether Bank A or Bank B would have to show up its capital, you know. So then the question of the banking reform in 2018, 2019 comes comes into fruition, in the sense that we recapitalize the banks from a certain amount to a certain amount, but now exchange rate fluctuation and inflation has eaten into the capital, and that has become a problem. So someone will say that we did a fine banking sector reforms, but here again, we have come back to cost 90.
It's square one, basically, because what this means is the banks are bleeding. They are not going to be lending as much. We've spoken about agri financing, for example. It means the whatever, less than 4% is going to shrink even further. What does that mean? It has an effect on farmers and what they can produce. So they are also going to, last year we had lots of conversations where people were saying, instead of upscaling, they are now downscaling or downsizing. What would that mean for food security, food sufficiency in the country? Then you talk about lending to businesses, small businesses especially, because the big ones, sometimes they have economies of scale, so they can manage the situation. But the small businesses that are dependent on loans, now those loans are going to be few and far between. And then we can also talk about those who are already on loan, and the monetary policy rate and everything else and how it affects them. If you're on a facility, it means these are heady winds that you're flying into.
So if you are on a fixed rate, then you are at an advantageous position. But you know, most businesses apply for loans on a floating rate. So it matches with economic conditions.
Yeah.
And that is where the challenge is. The multinationals,
because they are variable.
Yes, the multinationals or the foreign institutions have an advantage because they can depend on their parent companies. I hope you are getting. For instance, the multinational banks, the Nigerian bank, they were very smart when Fitch started sending signal that we may default on our, loans, or I mean the country's loans or bonds. In the sense that in 2021, before I think 2019, before COVID, the signs were there.
They were there.
At the rate of borrowing was going to send us into a ditch.
Even without COVID and this Russo-Ukrainian war, things would have still happened on the back of our overborrowing.
I will quote the World Bank country director, Pierre Laporte. He was on another station, and he mentioned categorically that if Ghana experienced a shock, we are likely to have issues. And that is what we are seeing today. So COVID, Russia and Ukraine hit the economy, and we are in tatters. If you look at the indicators, in economics, economists work with data. Finance and economic professionals work with data, and data doesn't lie. Once you use the model to compute the data, you would arrive at a particular result.
Conclusion.
And anyone who go by the same method would get the same result.
So moving forward, right before we let go of you, moving forward, what does this mean for our banks? Many of them, I mean, after the banking sector cleanup, we had many of them merge. Now, even after merging, some of them are going to have to recapitalize. They are going through severe financial straits. What are the projections when it comes to our banks? I know that for some of the well-established ones, those from outside that have been here for about a century and others which have been in operation across the world for a long time, they may have systems, mop-up systems across the world to be able to deal with the situation. But how about the others? What likely is going to happen? What are we going to see?
Well, let me say that in terms of systems, the central bank had done quite well to ensure that the banks are sound and stable. We are hoping that the Financial Stability Fund would be established as quickly as possible. We know that the World Bank has made commitment. So banks that are highly impacted would have to depend on the Stability Fund to survive. But if you look at our financial space, largely they are dominated by multinationals. Even the Nigerian banks, I mean, we classify them as multinationals. Many of them would depend on their parent company, like I said earlier, to recapitalize. We all know that Standard Bank, First National Bank, parent company, which is First Rand, have already indicated that they would recapitalize their operations here. What I am worried is the real sector. The banking system or the banks are the engine of the economy globally. So therefore, when the banks are impacted by any shock, it comes back to hit the real sector. So if you walk around, people will tell you that they do not have money or there is no money in their pocket. And
Right.
that is the reality we are facing now. However, we are hoping that things will not take too long for the banking sector to bounce back.
But is that a realistic projection? Like you said, in financial circles, we prognosticate, but we prognosticate on facts.
Absolutely. But we are hoping that we'll get the IMF program. For that one, the survival of this economy hinges on the IMF program. You cannot run away from it. Our reserves...
We've got to such a point of instability that...
It's almost depleted. And for you to have 2 weeks import cover is really a problem.
Recently, we spoke about our reserves and the fact that we're in dire straits.
Another shock.
Right.
You are doomed.
It could be anything.
So we are praying that we will get the IMF program, hopefully latest next month or at worst by June.
But it's taking pretty long, isn't it? We said, yes, June, but the signs, the writing on the wall, I know this is really not, but the writing on the wall is not looking too good. The last time there was supposed to be some debate on it at the IMF level, they swerved us.
Yesterday I was speaking to one of the top economists in this country. He once worked with the fund for 10 years, and I won't mention his name because I will not be fair to him. He was making a point, and I totally agreed with him. The fund appears to be playing diplomacy with us, and they are not comfortable with certain decisions made by our authorities in the past. And because they have interest, they have,
there's a stake. Yeah.
They have exposure in terms of our economic management. They also are mindful not to lose some of their loans to us. It's very critical. So it's quite difficult for now to say categorically that we are going to get the program tomorrow or on Saturday. That's where the danger is. And because he had that experience at the fund, chairing over 300 board meetings, according to him, he do not think that we have gotten to the position where we will secure the fund program as soon as possible. And that is where my worry is. So I feel that if the authorities are listening, perhaps they have to readjust or reposition themselves and have the belief that we should do A, B, C, D in order to secure the program as quickly as possible. Because the danger is that prices of goods and services could escalate. Exchange rate is at risk if we do not get the fund program, because we need the fund to improve our balance of payments. That is very critical.
Charles Nixon Yeboah is head of Joy Business, a Joy Business editor, and he joined us as well on that bit. Chazi, that's how he usually call him. Thanks for joining the conversation. Let's now go on Zoom and have an interaction with, well, we have Professor Lord Mensah of the University of Ghana Business School. We also have Dr. Ayamga connecting with us. I'll start with you, Dr. Ayamga. What do you make of this latest report and what it evinces when it comes to our banks and how healthy they are?
Yeah, good morning, Ben. I think it's worrisome, and it's something that was already hitting us. You have to look at the manner in which we did the domestic debt restructuring. And then you would realize that apart from we knowing that the banking sector was going to be the first to be impacted, the manner in which the restructuring was done exacerbated these things and accelerated the rate at which they are happening. Many of us, yes, expected the banks to take in some losses, but we didn't expect that it will happen so soon. And that is because of the way in which the Minister of Finance handled the debt restructuring program in the domestic arena. It is because he looked more like the banker in the deal or no deal show rather than someone who was leading providing all the information and then letting the banks be in a position to analyze their risk, analyze their exposure, adequately prepare their consumer base and their customer base, and then either plan, make mitigations, and then see how they could overcome these things. But they were taken aback. The minister kept information and used the information to get others to come on board and others to not. So that is why we are here. We expected this banking loss, but not so quickly. Of course, why did we expect it? We knew definitely that the banks are somehow exposed. And because they are exposed, they have to write off a significant proportion of their loans as bad debts. That is because, first, we are seeing a dampening business environment characterized by reduced investor confidence. You are looking at a situation where inflation is increasing, the cost of borrowing is going up. And also, more importantly, you are looking at a system where people are jittery, people are not sure of what is going to happen. So when people are uncertain, they tend to keep money longer, what we call a reduced money velocity. And that means that when they get money, they don't spend. All this culminates in a weakening business environment. And that means that if the business environment is weakened, businesses are not able to pay banks what they owe them. And if they don't pay the banks have to write off these loans and then get exposed. That's one of the challenges we face. Secondly, the banks have also been exposed in the equity market, the share market. Their share values are falling and they are no longer attractive. So nobody wants to take his money and go and invest in banks. And because their share prices are falling, their values are falling. And if banks' values are falling, they are not attractive, they don't get the customer base in order to grow. So the banks are not also growing. If you look at all these things, what happens? It is the real sector, businesses not being able to do the real production, produce the goods and services that we need to keep our economy going. And that is also going to translate into government not also meeting its revenue targets. So either way you look at it, either from the banking side or even from the real sector, we are going to experience significant shortfalls. That is why I think that this development has come rather too quickly. Everywhere in the world, when the financial sector starts showing signs of weakness, then it means that you are headed in for disaster. We didn't expect that this would start so quickly, but we knew it was coming. Now everybody is talking about some banks having the ability to absorb these losses because they are multinationals, their parent companies may help them navigate these challenges. But my worry is that if we do not see significant indications that the business environment can reboot and come back into full swing, you may have some of these banks downscaling and eventually folding up. That is the doomsday scenario, and that is what I fear most going forward.
You say we knew it would come, but we didn't think it would come this quickly. Professor Mensah, what do you make, and I'll come into the studio, I'll have ample time here. What do you make of this latest statement in terms of the bank's financial health? And do you also think that we've got to this point a little too soon?
Well, not too soon. It was expected long ago. Let's look at the bank's operations. The bank operates by taking deposits and then giving out loans and then investing. So if you look at a typical balance sheet of a bank, you're going to look at the asset side and you will see cash, you will see treasury bills, you see government bonds, you will see fixed assets. You're going to see all sorts of assets listed at the outside of the balance sheet. Now, clearly, a typical bank, and this is an exercise I've been doing with my students. I teach bank management. Anytime I get new class, I tell my students to pick the last 5 years of, a particular bank, and then we study the balance sheet. And the trend is clear. The trend has always been that most banks have been overly concentrating on government bonds. Banks are not doing the core retailing, which is giving out loans. And I don't blame them on that because of the economic structure.
Yeah.
The company has positioned itself in such a way that you can easily make money without necessarily stressing yourself up. Just accumulate.
Which is what they've been doing. Unfortunately, now the bubble has burst.
Exactly. Just accumulate money and put the money in government instrument, and over time you'll be fine. Now, if you look at the sequencing of the income statement of the banks from the last 5 years, consistently, banks have been, recording profits over the last 5 years. It's this year that is exceptional. It is exceptional because the only asset that, the asset that they've been concentrating on have been exposed as a result of the debt restructuring. Now, government has slashed down interest rate. So if you look at the various income streams of the banks, you realize that the shortfall is in the interest rate, interest income. And so for me, I'm not surprised because the kind of banking we've been doing in this country has always been that, we overly concentrate on government instrument. And then also the assurance that government gives as a result of satisfying its obligations has always been consistent, with the exception of this year, that we had this debt restructuring, that there has been a failure. Apart from that, even the loans that the banks give, they concentrate on contractors who are working with the government. So you could see that the bank's existence thrives on government activities. And over the past years, it's only government that has been in business, because we had an environment where interest rates are high, environment where liquidity has been problematic, and as a result of that, businesses are not able to access funds easily, and so banks tend to lend to government, and then government businesses have been going on. So I'm not surprised at all that the shocks that the economy has received has quickly transcended to the banking sector. It's as a result of the exposures that the way the banks have been operating over the years. But I don't blame them on that anyway. That's how the economy has been structured. The economy has been structured in such a way that only government does business. Ordinary person does not do business much. Access to funds has been a problem. And so that where you can lend to and where you can invest has been in a government, circle. So that is, the problem we're facing now. And I always say that, overly concentration of assets has always been an early warning signal, which, the banks were supposed to pick to indicate that once, something gets hit, as far as economic management is concerned, they're all going to have a problem. And so once you see, when you see banks concentrating their assets in particular areas, especially in the corridors of government instrument, then you should know that, once they get hit, and that's what we call heading in banking. They all head in a particular area. So once there's a hole, they all fall in it. Not surprised, more than 90% of the banks will be recording losses this year. But hey, let's go back in the years. These banks have been building reserves over the years. So the shock that they are receiving this year, and if you extend it backwards, they should have some kind of neutralization. And so for me, it is surprising, but then all is not lost. They should go back in the years and find a way to neutralize some of the reserve they've been building up with the shocks that the loss that they've made this year. Right, and that's the interesting part, because it's not always the case that the banks are this prudent when it comes to managing the resources accrued over the years. Of course, dividends will be paid to shareholders and the rest. And like we've seen, even in terms of the banking sector cleanup, sometimes the banks are simply not as prudent as they ought to be. So that could be problematic. So just to clarify this, just give me a yes or no answer, and I will come to Seram Kawo
in the studio. We're talking about last year and what happened. But did I hear you say that more than 90% of banks will be incurring losses this year? Is that what you said?
Right, that would be surprised because of the overly concentration in government bonds.
All right, all right. So there you have it. That's the verdict. Let me come to Sarah Mkawo on the same beat. Tricky, turbulent waters, very choppy waters for the banking sector right now. What is your reading of this latest statement?
What we are saying, as my colleagues have explained, is not surprising. The writings have been on the wall, but we have not been proactive in looking at the situation.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt. Every time we say the writing was on the wall, you heard Charles Nixon Yeboah, my colleagues, say that even around 2019, right before COVID, yes, the writing was... How come the writing is always on the wall, yet we don't see it?
We've seen it. We live in a country when the experts talk, the technocrats talk, the politicians do not listen. These things have been said long time ago. Professor Lord Mensah have been talking about Ghana going to IMF, making sure that we right the wrong on the things that have been happening in the country. But that has not been listened to. And so we have been talking about over-concentration on some investment. We've been told and we've learned all our lives reading that do not put all your eggs in one basket. But what do we see today? We see the banks investing in government bonds. And government is in trouble and is coming to you to tell you that I am in trouble. Help me out. Let us come out of the woods. You said you are not going to negotiate with government. That is not the right way to go. You see, the reason why the banks are suffering today is because initially they have a higher interest earning with a shorter term period on the instruments that they have. But now it has been exchanged for a lower interest earning with a longer term of payment.
Obviously, that will have an impact.
That is going to have an impact on what the banks are going through. And they are going to record losses for some time until they have recapitalized, until they have diversified their lending and the way they do things. Most of the banks will call you and they will ask you to come for loans. They give loans to businesses without checking whether these businesses are using the loans for the purpose for which they came for it. They have no education. They don't check whether the people actually need the money for what they want to use it for. And hence, if we continue doing things that particular way, we're going to have problems. We have gone through the financial sector cleanup, but we are back. The Bank of Ghana changed the minimum capital requirement from 200 million to 400 million. That's the minimum for some banks. There are banks that are not working. They are not doing the right things. And Bank of Ghana has been on these banks, and that led to the measure of some of the banks. Now, what we are saying, if care is not taken, we may have some more measures coming.
I was just about to ask, do you foresee further measures happening?
If you don't have enough liquidity, and the Bank of Ghana Financial Stabilization Fund, where they have the Financial Stabilization Council, that comprises the Securities and Exchange Commission, Bank of Ghana, National Insurance Commission, we have the National Pensions Authority, and some others who are part of that particular commission that will look at the impact of the debt exchange, and then they come out with measures to control this. With the establishment of the Stabilization Fund, which is telling us that, yes, if you are facing liquidity challenges, we would be in a position to help you out. But the 15 billion that they are putting there, the question is, would that be enough? What are the modalities? What are we waiting for to make sure that we get this fund running so that banks, insurance companies, pension schemes that might face some amount of liquidity challenge will be able to access some of these funds? Well, the IMF deal is very significant for us. We need it. We need it to ensure that we shore up the entire development. Look at what is happening in the banking sector. They are incurring losses. If the banks are incurring losses, lending is going to be contracted. If lending is contracted, businesses are not going to get funds to produce. Importers are not getting money to import into the country. Government is losing tax revenue from the banks. You are losing tax revenue from the businesses. The ports.
If the banks bleed,
yes,
you bleed.
You will bleed. If the financial sector is in turmoil, you are going to be in turmoil. And so there is the need for us to safeguard the financial sector. The ports, activities at the port have reduced. And once these things are happening, the revenue that we want to generate so that we can shore up development in the country is not going to work. We want to raise revenue, but then the size of government is still high. We are talking about fiscal discipline in terms of government expenditure. All these things have to work hard. Otherwise, you know, when people lose job, you are not going to get a tax.
Yeah.
And prices of items will go up. Workers are going to suffer. And that will have a huge implication for national security. And so the managers of the economy will need to open up. They open up in the sense that they need to tell us what really the situation is. Involve the players in the industry. Bring technocrats on board. Because whoever the consultants that you are bringing from outside the country will rely on the brains that we have in the country.
Right.
To solve the problems for you.
So interesting points you make up to this point. I would like to find out from you, gentlemen, and I'm going to the next round. Maybe this will be addressed to all of you quickly. If you can give me about a minute and a half on it, I'd be grateful. One, so we're looking at these smaller banks, or the banks generally. We've had them have to merge in the past on the back of the banking sector cleanup. Will it necessarily be better if we had fewer banks that, you know, merged and we didn't have, let's say, 20 plus in the system, but we had far less, let's say, a third of that number that are much stronger? Is that the way to go? And again, in terms of government, I don't know what term to use, government-related ones, like the CBG, like
NIB.
The NIB, like the GCB Bank, right? How safe are they in all of these discussions we're having? So I'll start with you, Dr. Ayamga, on this point. I just want brief, succinct, straight to the point reactions. I'll start with you, Dr. Ayamga.
I don't think we have much of a choice here. The market and the economic crisis is going to dictate what we are going to do at the end of the day. It's not a situation of whether we should have some fewer, bigger banks or a smaller one. I am one that believes in competition, and I would wish that we had a better financial access, especially given that we are a rural economy largely. It doesn't matter how you want to turn it. And the more accessible banks are to micro businesses and businesses in the rural area, the better. But here is the case that the banks, and just like Professor Lansah rightly put it, the banks have not been taught to behave like banks. They've been overpampered by government, taking the secure option of investing in government bonds, and even where they have to give consumer loans, they give to civil servants, and these loans are largely secured by the earnings and also commitments even to pay people's retirement.
Do you feel that was irresponsible? On hindsight, do you feel that was irresponsible? Before you go on, that action, that decision.
I've always maintained that our banks have not been behaving like how banks in other places behave. They don't actually take risk. And what you do is you take risk, make profit, and learn from it. They have largely taken the secure lines, relying on government, and now that government is sinking, this is also telling on them. And my fear is that the period is too short for them to learn how to behave like banks. So at the end of the day, we have to go through this painful process of merging some of them again, downsizing some of them. And unfortunately, some may have their licenses withdrawn. Even if that doesn't happen, I expect that some of these foreign banks, if they don't have confidence in our economy, they may gradually wind down. We may see some withdrawal of some foreign banks, and we're going to have some serious challenges there. I think, and I must say that IMF has not been straightforward with government. I said the last time that the managing director...
Did you just say the IMF had not been straightforward with government?
Yeah, it hasn't.
My colleague was earlier saying that the IMF was being diplomatic. You are thinking the same way.
Behaving like a banker. You go to the bank will tell you your idea is a bad one. They don't speak to the government like an economist. And this government, the head is sweet. You tell them something, they don't take just a compliment to make you look happy. They come to the table, they come tell Ghanaians that they are happy with us. Everybody who has been watching what the IMF has been telling this government knows that if you look at the data doesn't tell you the same story. And instead of actually telling government the truth and letting it work on a better program, it has been telling them, oh, you are almost there, you have gone through a lot of pain to achieve the unlocked funds. But it's not pain you go through. It is a consistent program backed by a proof of debt sustainability that gets you an IMF program. It's not the amount of pain you go through. And if you have the IMF providing this kind of feedback to government, then it doesn't allow government to listen to the technocrats, experts, like Sayon rightly said.
All right. Thank you very much. Interesting points you have made there. Let me come to Professor Lord Mensah. Do you concur? Are you in agreement with Dr. Ayamga that some of these banks may have their licenses eventually withdrawn? As for the mergers, it is clear they are going to happen. What is your take on that, even as we look at the other aspect of the conversation, sir? Hello, Prof. Professor Mensah?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you get the question, please?
I didn't get a question. Can you take me back, please?
So the same one, I posed it to all of you, the local banks, the homegrown ones, CBG, NIB, GCB Bank, among others. What do you foresee happening to them in this picture? And it escapes me the other bit I posed about, generally, yes, it was about whether a smaller group of banks is necessarily healthier, whether that is healthier for us. But a quick point was made by Dr. Ayamga that some banks may have their licenses withdrawn. Do you agree with him on that?
Yeah, I don't.
You don't?
You see, we need to appreciate the financial architecture of banking in this country. You see, once the financial system assumes a certain shape, right? Difficult to, destroy it. And when you destroy it, it has a serious economic repercussions. That is what we did, for the banking sector cleanup. And I tell you, we're not going to come out of that, together with this debt restructuring and all those. It's going to be difficult. What the bank needs to do in their next level of, intake of liabilities, taking on people's deposit, just to match it up with, government maturities, instrument, and other, assets that they would like to convert them to. I don't believe in, more or less putting up, new mergers and other banks are being acquired and all those. You would destroy the financial system. What we need in this country is not about the numbers number of banks. We need to look at what we call client outreach. Where the banks, comes to establishment, and then possibly look at the number of clients they are reaching out there as far as, retailing is concerned. A typical bank must, do what we call financial intermediation. And that is, the bank's main, job. What we have witnessed in the past has been financial disintermediation, where the banks are not retailing, but they are rather investing in government instrument. And sometimes I termed it, lazy banking in a way. But in the end, it is the economy that has put that shape of, financial structure, where banks will take deposit and then invest it in government instrument.
Right.
But I don't in, merging banks that will get weaker. After all, we have the, Financial Stability Fund, those banks that the Bank of Ghana, and I know Bank of Ghana will not like to do any wave of mergers and acquisitions again, as it happened in the banking sector cleanup. They can't afford the cost.
So what is going to happen then?
Now, if you do that, a lot of people are going to struggle in assessing the financial system. You're going to end up having strong banks because already there is, a slogan in the financial space that we say, big banks are too big to fail. What is happening in the system now, with the losses that the banks are making, I can tell you the big banks, looking at their, profit over the past 5 years, they should be able to receive some of these shocks. What about the smaller banks? When it comes to tapping into the, what do we call it? The stability fund, I think, they should prioritize them and get to know the weaker ones that they can support. Because, if you go all out and say all the banks should come and tap into the stability fund, trust me, you may end up, giving money to banks that could have, received the shocks that they are going through now. So for me, I don't think we need any wave of merger or any wave of acquisitions. What we need is structured bank, well liquefied, for them to change, their, activities, by extending loans to businesses and individuals, rather than investing in government instruments.
Let me come now into the studio so it is clear, but I don't see a lot of you really looking at the GCB banks and the others. What is your take on that?
Yeah, the GCB, NIB, ADB, CBG, these are banks that are very crucial to the sustainability of this economy. They have a chunk of the funds of Ghanaians, and government cannot afford to allow these banks to go down. And that protection has been given to these banks for some time now. You remember the ADB share issue, where there were a group of persons from, is it Unibank, that bought shares in that particular bank, and then the stock exchange will have to come in to cancel the deal. They have to go to court, and the court upheld that particular situation because these banks play a crucial role. And you look at ADB, they serve a lot of people who are not in the affluent, who are not the affluent in society. The GCB, same way. And they are some of the largest that we can find. For the course of the measure, we have the Consolidated Bank of Ghana being the largest that we have in the country. And so the banking sector is very crucial to the existence of every economy around the world.
All right.
If your banking sector is down, your economy is down. It's the life of the country. You cannot just allow it to go down. And government, through the Bank of Ghana, what we have experienced earlier on, I'm sure would not allow this to go down. And hence the establishment of the Financial Sector Stabilization Fund to ensure that banks go into that. We need to assure Ghanaians that, yes, the Professor Lord Mensah made mention of the outreach, the education. People are banking. They are saving money. But banking is not all about saving money and taking loans. There are other things the banks will have to educate people on. If I'm coming for a loan from you, what are the types of interest rate that I have?
A lot of people don't even know whether their terms, their loan facilities are variable or fixed.
Fixed, yes.
In fact, it is only now that a lot of people go and say, but you used to take this out of my account. Why are you taking so much more? Oh, your terms are actually variable, not fixed.
So people don't know about it. So we need to do that. The banks are supposed to connect people who have surplus amount of money to those who have deficit, those who have investment opportunities, but they don't have the money. Connect all these things so that there will be financial intermediation, breaking the risks, breaking the bulk. But at the end of the day, the banks only concentrate on, let me give you loan because you are on a government payroll and the money will be taken from source. And that is all. And that will not be enough. So going forward for the banks and the other ones that we have, yes, a lot of people are interested in banking now, but they don't understand the banking concepts.
All right.
The products that are available. And there is the need for thorough and better education in the banking sector. Not everybody. Banking should be from senior high, even junior high school.
Yeah, even primary, at the primary level, I mean.
That in the system. Once it is in the system, we will have this. National service, what are we using them for? People have done business, accounting. They understand these things. Can't we organize them and send them to the various markets, the various villages, so that they will give a lot of education to the people to know what is happening? So if you are coming to defraud me, I will be able to know that, no, this is not what...
So more education as far as the financial space is concerned.
That is what is going to keep our system running.
Two quick shots at each one of you, gentlemen. Not bullets still, but question shots. And I would have you throw back your answers quickly at me. This time I'll start with you, Seyram, in the studio. One, has the banking sector cleanup, what we had, has it lived up to expectation? Because we're here, back to square one. And in fact, we're still paying for the last banking sector cleanup. So it creates a very tricky situation. Then two, how much of a role has the domestic debt exchange program played in what we are seeing now as far as our banks are concerned? Quick thoughts.
One, if not for the banking sector cleanup, we would have had worse situation than what we are experiencing now.
Even barring the cost, which we're still paying.
We are still
20+ billion.
If had it not been that, and if you read reports that have been sent out, it is prudent for Bank of Ghana to take some of the decisions that they have taken to safeguard savings, though some people are still struggling to get their monies from the other fund managers and all those things. It is also very important for us to know that, yes, we are still paying though, but hey, it is better. It would have been worse than what we are seeing now. You remember there are people who are at the law court.
Still
for some of these things. If you allow these people to still be in the banking sector, when they don't have capital and the liquidity support that is being given to you, you use the liquidity support to establish another bank. And the people are struggling, and you use money to divert into other production areas. Those things are very hard. The domestic debt exchange actually affected what we are seeing today. As I have said earlier on, people have...
If you had on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you attribute in terms of causative factors to what we are seeing now from the banks?
About 80%.
80%. All right, thank you. Let me go to Dr. Ayamga on the same points. Please, gentlemen, try and let's make this quick enough. There are a few other points I want us to address, so let's not dwell too much on these. Be very succinct if you can. Dr. Ayamga.
Yes, I would say the banking sector cleanup was necessary. Was it rightly done? I don't think so. We needed to separate the issues of things that border on criminality, misapplication of banking resources, from people that had genuine challenges with managing their liquidity. And I felt that the approach shouldn't have just been to get everyone out of the stream. There are some banks, and I still stand today, and I believe that the Indrum group of banks that was transforming the rural area. I'm from a rural area, and I can attest to the fact that that bank was actually providing the financial intermediation that the big banks in the cities were not doing. And I felt that the approach that we used to lump all these banks that were having problems together and apply almost the same formula to them, but at different periods in time, was not the right decision. So I would say that, yes, the banking sector cleanup was necessary, but the approach we used is not the best. And that is why we have not seen the benefits of the banking sector cleanup. And it has fed into this domestic debt exchange program, which I believe has accelerated the rate at which the problems we anticipated with this, our debt crisis, has come. So all I would say is straight to the point that I would give maybe close to 60-70% on domestic debt exchange program. But
did you say more than 70%?
No, I won't say more than 70% because you see.
No, I just want you to re-echo what you said. Did you say that?
I'll allocate about 70% to the domestic debt exchange program.
All right.
Regardless of who would have arrived here anyway.
Professor Mensah, on those same points. Hello, Prof. Prof, please unmute.
Right. So can you hear me now, please?
I can. Go ahead.
Right. So the domestic debt exchange has not paid for itself. Let me put it that way. We had this debt exchange somewhere around we're not talking about the banking sector cleanup has not paid for itself because it was an economic exercise. And for economic exercise, we're expecting that at least we'll have some time to get the money that we spent on this cleanup back. If you look at the taxes that has been collected from the banking sector over the past years, has it been able to cover the 21 billion that was spent on this cleanup? I mean, let's ask ourselves a simple question. If you put that together, you realize that the exercise has not paid for itself. It was an exercise that we needed badly as a country. But then the question is, how did we approach it? Now, let's take a particular bank into perspective. When a bank is in existence for more than 5 years, that bank, operates creating economic benefit and at the same time social benefit. If you try to restructure the banking system and as a result of cleanup and people lose their jobs, to some extent, those who lose their jobs, where they were sending their kids to school as a result of, for the fact that they were working in a bank, being able to pay school fees.
Unfortunately, the connection is a bit problematic. Let's just see whether we can get Professor Lord Mensah back to complete the thoughts that he was sharing. Prof? Prof, we're going to try to do this again. It appears the connection is bad. Maybe we'll have you join the conversation via the phone line so we can cap it off in just a bit. But we've addressed quite a number of the issues. I want us now to take a look at the IMF program, or even before that, there is this little bit I want us to take a look at when it comes to the Bank of Ghana. In fact, when we look at our debt to GDP ratio, we see that the impact, according to Fitch Ratings, Ghana's debt to GDP has fallen by only 1% despite debt restructuring. And again, the likes of Professor Bokpin have stated that data on the economy does not add up and that the Bank of Ghana should come again. Before we get into that, Prof, you were making a quick point.
If you look at the social and economic aspect of the banking sector cleanup, I will say that we've not paid for the 21 billion that we spent on this, cleanup.
Right.
So from where I sit, it has not paid for itself.
So will another such program be an even heftier burden for us. Is that a burden we can carry? Is it a burden we can realistically carry?
We can't. That is why I indicated earlier that, the country cannot go through those kind of, restructuring again. Right. Changing the financial architecture will be a huge cost to the country.
Right. Right. So let's get into that next bit of the questioning. Again, I'll start with you. I believe I've given everyone a bite on the last one. Your data on the economy does not add up. Professor Bokbin has been addressed at the Bank of Ghana. We know the story there. But even more importantly, Ghana's debt to GDP has fallen by only 1% despite the domestic debt exchange or the debt restructuring program we've embarked on. That's according to Fitch ratings. What do you make of these? Are you in agreement? And though it may be 1%, what does that 1% mean?
It's worrying. It's worrying because the entire debt exchange, and for us to get a relief or a reduction in the debt to GDP ratio by 20-something, by 55%. And that is why we are doing this, to ensure that our debt levels are sustainable. If all what we have done is just resulting into 1%, it's a worrying signal for us. That might be one of the reasons why IMF is trying to be diplomatic with us in the way they handle the entire debt.
Because if after everything we've done, all the pain we felt, it's just 1% shaved off.
It means that, we've been saying that government has not been forthcoming with information on the debt exchange and what the real purpose of the exchange is supposed to achieve. So if all that we've gone through, the struggling, the strike that people have gone through is resulting into 1%, then it's a clear signal. And the External Creditors Committee has not been formed yet to get an assurance from these people. And we are not living in an island. All these people are watching, they are listening, they are reading what is happening in the country. And once they are doing this, they also want you to play a role. You've gone to them for 17th, this is the 17th time you are going to them for the same issues. Haven't you learned anything from it?
Maybe this time even worse.
Worse than what you have done. Why do we always go back? Why can't we do our own things? We mismanage the resources of the country. We are destroying our water bodies, and it is all over the place. It is cost. It is money. We're saying that we are building hospitals. We borrow money to build hospital, and then we pollute the water bodies for the people to go to the hospital, and we use our money in taking care of these people. No, we cannot continue in this cycle. And so the IMF deal, we need it all right. But if all what we have done is just 1%, which means that the data that is being used is not clear per prof, which tells us that government needs to come clear on this whole issue. You see, government should know that they are not alone. The citizens are in this together. If the sector goes down, we are all down. We are all players in the industry. You are not the only one who have knowledge in the management of the economy. Please bring everybody along. Open up the space. There are ideas that will come. The person who is on the street that you think does not have any idea about the management of the economy, you will be shocked, will be the one that will give a little new idea, and that will be the one that will work for us. So government should come down so that we all come on board, and then we push this country forward. The over-politicization of the issues of the economy, especially when it comes to the banking, the financial sector, and all those things, is destroying our country. And we all need to come on board. Lack of clarity is the one that is pushing parliamentarians to do what they are doing in terms of we are passing the bill, we are not passing the bill, because of lack of clarity. Parliamentarians must come on board. Everybody who is a citizen of this country should come on board. But who would make it possible? It is government that can make it possible.
Same for you, Dr. Ayamga and Prof. Doc, briefly on the same point.
As I said, I'm not surprised by the lack of movement in our debt to GDP ratio.
1%, is that not incredibly small? 1%?
We don't have a program. We have what I told my friends is the IMF program. We want to ride on the tailwinds of speculation that we have a program, designing a program that responds to our economic challenges. That is what we have been doing. And it doesn't matter how you look at it. We did not design a program that, first of all, led to some fiscal discipline.
Right.
That we cut government expenditure, which is the cause of the ballooning debt anyway. And remember the last time I told you, if you look at the numbers, this is a government that has been borrowing at about 8 billion a year for the last 5 years or so. So you can't just get up and then write a program seeking 3 billion to solve a 50 billion issue.
Right.
That is not going to wash, and that has been one of them. We have misdiagnosed the problem. We have designed a program in such a way that we want to get people in the economy to believe that we have a program and then change speculation and other things, not actually addressing economic issues here.
Right.
And the diplomacy of the IMF has been saying is contributing to this. People don't want Ghana to fail because of our strategic importance. But that does not mean that if we are not designing an IMF program, we shouldn't be told in the face.
All right.
And because we have told in the face, the numbers don't lie and the numbers don't do diplomacy. That is why we have only achieved just 1%. And I'm even surprised we got that 1% because I wrote off this program right from the beginning because it doesn't respond to anything. First, nobody knows what it is. And it is strange that you are at the IMF negotiating, and many of the stakeholders in the country don't actually know the content of the IMF program. And that is the problem.
Right. That is the problem. Professor Mensah, the very final round, even as you address that, so I want to start with you. The very final round, I just want a very incredibly brief take. IMF program, what are your expectations? When are we getting it? But you can address the other aspect as well. Professor Mensah, very briefly on this.
With a debt to GDP ratio increasing, reducing by 1% margin, there are two indicators that goes into debt to GDP ratio. It's your debt levels and at the same time, your GDP. So, we recorded marginal growth when it comes to our GDP in 2022. And so if you are to compute the debt to GDP and you use the lag GDP, then obviously you should expect that there will be, a marginal, reduction as far as our, debt to GDP is concerned. I can tell you that, the chunk of our debt is sitting out there. Even though if you look at, in terms of cities, it's 50-50. If you convert and relate, the exchange rate and the rate at which our, CD has been depreciated over the past month, clearly it tells you that before we can reduce, our debt, we may have to restructure, the external debt very well. And hey, look, you see, we compute the debt to GDP looking at your debt in accumulation. The fact that you have done, debt restructuring does not mean that those debts are wiped off. They have been spread over the years. So a longer period, the only difference is that burden upon burden on yearly basis will be reduced. So what we have done in our domestic debt restructuring, which we seek to do externally as well, is that government want to ease burden of interest payment and some principal payments, year on year, so that we prolong our debt. But the debt still remains the same. But then
We're losing Prof again. Unfortunately, we would have to move the conversation forward. And actually, we're capping off. IMF program or no IMF program? Very briefly, IMF program?
We need the IMF program. By late, for me, at least by the end of the quarter.
By the end of the quarter?
Yeah.
Can we make it?
We can if we engage more with our external creditors.
Do we need more honesty?
We need more,
Prof, please
we need more than honesty, transparency, accountability.
We need honesty,
we
transparency,
need accountability
before we can get the IMF.
We can get the IMF deal. If we don't get it, we will not.
Thank you, Sairam. Dr. Ayamga, you didn't speak on the IMF bid. Very briefly, what do we need to cross that hurdle?
Yes, I think I'll agree with my colleague.
All right.
There's need for us to be more transparent, but we need it. It's like a cancerous leg. We need to cut it off before we treat. So the IMF is the amputation we need to stabilize our bleeding. So yes, we need the IMF. As to whether we'll get it this quarter, I doubt. I think I'm more optimistic that going into the next quarter. But this quarter, the way it is, unless somebody we are not getting a program.
All right, you're doubtful we can get it in this quarter. You think we'll get it in the next quarter. Prof, you're finally back. You have the final word and we cap it off.
Yeah, so I was saying that the marginal reduction in our debt to GDP has to do with the marginal increase in the GDP that we witnessed in 2022. But then as to whether we'll get the IMF within this quarter, for me, I would even prefer we get the IMF in the last quarter. Government must position itself, you're
afraid of you're afraid of the spending in an electoral year, right?
Exactly. Government must position itself. And the budget that we're going to have, the budget review and the main budget for 2024 must reflect, the economy we have, not necessarily throwing out numbers which will call for, serious unnecessary financing.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You just heard Professor Lord Mensah, lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. We also had joining the conversation Sairam Kawa, senior lecturer, University of Cape Coast School of Business. Sairam, it's really good. Today you joined us in the studio.
Yes.
We also had Dr. Michael Ayamga, I beg your pardon, Dr. Michael Ayamga, economist at the University for Development Studies. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Before we get into that next conversation, crucial conversation as well, we're talking money matters and food in our schools. Water is life. Awake, of course, is purified water, premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And in terms of sizes, it's everyone is in there. If it's your children, 330, 500 ml bottles, you can just fit it into their backpacks or bags and they can take it to school. If you're a heavy drinker, 750 milliliters. If you drink even more, 1.5 liters, just like I would do in a given day. If you're thinking of offices and homes, you can get the 19-liter jar bottles for your office or home. That is ideal. So all you need to do now is stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water. It's another quality product by Casapreco Company Limited. And here's the heartwarming part. If you actually make a purchase, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center for every bottle you purchase. And of course, that is indeed heartwarming. This advert is approved by the FDA. When we return, it's about our caterers, the school feeding program. They are saying you can't intimidate us, you can't rough us up and get us back, though some of them are beginning to go back. And they are also petitioning that while their backlog of arrears ought to be paid, they also want the grant to be increased from 97 pesos to 3 cedis. What should we know on that? Well, that conversation right after the break.
It's a real pleasure to still have you here on the AM show. I'm Bernice Lansah. Earlier, you saw my colleague Benjamin Akakpo discussing the impact of the domestic debt exchange program and the IMF deals and all that on our economy. Well, caterers under the school feeding program say they will not yield to intimidation to resume work. For about 3 weeks, they've withdrawn their services in demand for payment of arrears and an increase in the cooking grant per child from 97 pesos to 3 cedis. Now, they want leadership of the program to desist from issuing threats in addressing their challenges. Today, I've got two people who understand these issues better, who have worked in the sector, to share their thoughts on that with us. Former Minister for Gender, Madam Otiku Afisa-Jaba, joins me on the line. Good morning to you. Trust you're doing well. It's been a while.
Good morning to your viewers. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yes. I remember when the caterers announced their strike, first in Kumasi, your name was mentioned. One of the caterers says that during your era, things were managed better. First off, what is your appreciation of what is happening now? And tell us what you were doing differently when you were gender minister.
Thank you very much. School feeding is an important tool to alleviate poverty, reduce hunger and malnutrition in children. And to alleviate poverty means that reducing poverty in the children, in the caterers, in the farmers, in the parents. And so, when we come to this point where they are being paid only 97 pesos per meal, it's ridiculous. It means government is pretending to pay caterers, and caterers are pretending to cook. It's not possible to cook any meal, let alone a hot, nutritious meal for 97 pesos. And so, it's important that the government should pay the caterers all the amounts that are due them. The contract is not a charitable one. It is not a non-profit exercise. It is for them to earn an income, because most of them, 80% of the caterers are women. They don't work. Some of them are women organizers, but most of them are not women organizers. They are widows. They are single parents. They are looking for how to be breadwinners and take care of the needs of their family. They also engage people who clean, who serve the food, who cut up the onions and other things. So if they are not being paid, they cannot pay those workers. They buy fuel, electricity, water. The parents benefit because they don't now have to find money for the child. But if you don't do that, that means parents now have to look for money to feed the children. And children who don't get that will not go to school, so it will increase absenteeism, and rather the purpose of increasing enrollment will backfire. And so, the arrears is supposed to be paid in terms of the contract. It's a pre-financing thing, and the pre-financing should not be more than a term. Most workers in Ghana are paid monthly. All public servants are actually paid monthly. But school feeding, the contract is that it should be termly because the children go to school per term. So that a term is about 3 months. And so if that is the case, why should caterers always cry and fight before they are paid? Just like you, when is the end of the month, you have to go on strike, you will be paid. And so they should be paid timely and promptly, so that they can also get the money to go and repay the people they owe. When you owe somebody for tomatoes, for meat, for salt, or a pre-finance company or a bank, and you don't pay them, they will not give you any finance or the food stuff again. So until the caterers are paid, how will they pay for what they already owe? Some are owed not only the third term, second, and the first term. And it's important that they should feel good. And there is no motivation when you always have to cry and fight before you are paid, and then you are being underpaid. Is it because we don't value what they are doing for us? The whole purpose of working is job satisfaction. And if you are not well paid, you cannot be happy. If you are indebted and people are always knocking on your door for their money, always crying at you, you feel humiliated and disgraced. Why should that be? Teachers don't say that.
What were you doing differently during your time? Because yes, we know that what the contract says is that these caterers must pre-finance the cooking and feeding of the children, and then government will pay at the end of the term. But this time around, the caterers say the backlog is too much. What was it like during your time?
The pre-finance should be for 1 term. 1 term, not 2, 3 terms, 4 terms. And you should notify the cases. I used to notify them. You put notifications. So your number of days of cooking, the amount that is due you, you get a notice on your phone. So you know the amount that you are expected to be paid. And the issue of Ipswich and somebody's Ipswich number is not good and all of that. We got them to reconcile it with a gift. So you don't now wait when it's time for payment. You say that, oh, somebody's Ipswich number is wrong. What was the Ipswich number you were using to pay them before? I used to go to the Minister of Finance's house, sometimes as early as 5 a.m., to wait for him to ensure that the necessary processes at the Ministry of Finance are hastened for payment. And payment should be timely. Once it is not timely, then you have these problems. I also used to have meetings with the caterers to hear them out. Because if you are in Accra, you don't know what is happening in the north or in the Volta or wherever. And so it's important to meet them or their leaders quarterly or even half yearly to listen to their grievances. And when they petition, we should understand that they are not petitioning to shame anybody or to spoil anybody's job. They are fighting for their rights. Fighting for your rights is about justice. Where there is no justice, you have chaos. And when they refuse to cook because they are not being paid, let nobody be mischievous to say that they are shaming a government or anybody. It is their due, and they need to be respected.
You appear to have an issue, Madam Jabba. You seem to have an issue with the proactiveness in solving this matter. We also have seen how this situation has progressed over the time. Initially, it was just caterers in the Ashanti region, but now their colleagues across the 16 regions have joined them. What could have been done between the time the Kumasi caterers went on strike to prevent what we are seeing today, which is now a nationwide issue?
First, the regional minister of the Ashanti region should have been more tolerant of them, and he should apologize to them for his behavior. Secondly, the secretariat and the minister for gender should have called them by now to hear them out. I also understand that they've written letters to various departments and ministries concerned. To date, they have not heard anything. When you cry or make a plea, you should be heard. And the only way for discussion and negotiation is to call them to a meeting. Since Kumasi to date, who has called them for a meeting? That should be done immediately. And they should not be disrespected. You see, there is an issue of gender imbalance in this country. But we need to understand that 80% of the small-scale businesses are done by women. And they feed into the GDP. And it's important that their welfare and their conditions of service should be addressed promptly. The word is timely. If you don't pay somebody timely, then you are looking for trouble for them and for yourself. Because food prices have increased. Utility prices have increased. You know all the things, fuel and what have you. It's important that we make them feel good about themselves and we appreciate what they are doing because it's a public service that they are offering. And it is a contract. The contract means that I offer this service, you pay me this amount. But if I offer the service and you don't pay me for so long, then you need to sit with me and talk. When the workers go on strike, don't they sit with TUC and the various workers on a negotiating table? Why are they not doing that for the women in the catering? Is it because they are women? Is it because we don't appreciate their services? Why would you pay anybody 97 cedis? Is it because you undervalue the effort or the service they are providing?
97 pesos, it is, less than a cedi.
Come again?
I would say 97 pesos.
97 pesos. How much is bofrot? How much is kose? A ball of kenke, how much is it? Madam, how can you cook any meal, let alone a hot meal, for 97 pesos? I came and met it at 80 pesos. I took it to government to increase it to 2 cedis. They said that they couldn't, and they brought it down to 1 cedi. This was in 2018. We are now in 2023. What is the rate of inflation? What are the food prices like now? And so, they have a valid point. The caterers have a valid point. And I'm happy. Feel strongly that I must support and back them. Government must pay their arrears and increase the amount immediately and have a session with them, a discussion.
I'm happy.
All the arrears will be paid when. They want to know when the arrears will be paid and when the increments will be paid and what is the increment. These are valid questions. Bernice, if you are working, wouldn't you want to know how much you will be paid?
Definitely. I'm happy you brought in the issue of the current economic situation. Government has admitted times are hard. You just spoke about the rate of inflation. There are concerns, and in fact, at the early stages when we were discussing the economic woes, we were told that things will get worse before they get better. We are yet to receive an IMF deal. We don't know when that is coming. So everybody is literally living on the edge. Would you say it's time to think innovatively, re-strategize how to go about this whole school feeding program? Because clearly, as it is now, government appears to be struggling not only on the school feeding front, but in other sectors of the economy. The whole pre-financing arrangement, how can we innovatively move this program forward?
Thank you. I want us to just focus on the school feeding. The issues of the economy can be for another day. On school feeding, to make it innovative, to find other ways, one, they have to sit with the caterers. You see, when you do anything about somebody, you need to involve them in the decision making. And they will tell you how it should be done. And then, with their input, you can then come out with the final decision. It's also important that we help them with the pre-financing. When I was a minister, we had an arrangement with Maslow. It was a pilot. And the Maslow advanced, I think, 5,000 per caterer. And it was deducted from funds. That can continue. So that each time that they are paid, then automatically the money should not, the deduction should not go to Ministry of Gender, but should go straight to Maslow. They should also digitize the system, put in a management of information system, so that we reduce the human errors and all of those issues that are affecting them. Finding the money, the World Bank can be a part of it. This is a sustainable development goal, an agenda that started in 2005 under the Millennium Development Goals, school feeding. It is being done in Brazil and other places. We should be able to improve upon it and not to worsen the conditions of the people. School feeding needs to be improved. Without that, there is no point because, as I said, it will mean that government is undervaluing the services of the caterers, not appreciating them enough, and pretending to pay them. And they will also pretend to cook. So sometimes you see that the quality of the food is affected, the quantity is affected. So all these things, let us be real. Ghanaians, we like to talk a lot, but when it comes to the action, we fall short. This is the time for action for caterers. They are a vulnerable social group who must be looked at, and their welfare and their services of conditions must be effectively addressed immediately. Since 2018, they've been crying for all these things, and we are still at bay. For how long are they going to keep crying? Others have died. Others have all sorts of health issues because of the fact that they are not paid on time. And I'm sure if you did a research, you'll find that anytime they are not cooking, then it means that enrollment will reduce. As a rural development practitioner in Tumu, when school feeding came, class sizes exploded because a lot of the farming communities, the vulnerable communities, they don't have the funds to send children to school in terms of food. So if you don't go to the farm, you don't eat. But with school feeding, they came to the school to eat, my sister, and then they stayed. And today they are nurses and journalists like yourself. Sorry, come again.
No, I didn't say anything. Please continue with your submission.
Yes. And so when you are working at serving and improving poverty, improving enrollment, those are fundamental to the development of any country. For sustainable development, vulnerable groups like the cases and vulnerable children must be a priority. It is a measure of any country's welfare how vulnerable people, particularly women and children, fare. And if it is not going well, that means we need to immediately address this situation. I'm very passionate about this issue, and I am for the caterers and the children because I believe in Ghana, and I believe that we can do better, and we must do better. May Day is coming. Are the caterers not part of the workforce of Ghana? We keep talking about future leaders. We must show that we are serious about educating our children. And if they go to school to eat and remain and serve the country later, then we must invest wherever the government will find the money. I am calling upon the President and the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Gender to look for that money and pay them. We are coming to the end of April. Since January, what have they been doing about it? Listen, these are urgent times and we need urgent decisions for urgent results. Government must stop pretending to pay caterers and caterers must stop pretending to cook for the sake of Mother Ghana. I thank you all.
Right. I appreciate your call and thank you for using this platform to reach out to the minister and the both finance and gender ministers. But have you personally tried to intervene? I know some of the caterers said they reached out to you. Have you tried to use your obviously your position as a member of the governing party to try and intervene?
I'm 61 years old now. I've retired from politics. I empathize with them. I've listened to them, and that's why I've agreed to discuss this with you.
Right.
When you're given a position as the Minister of Gender, it is a unique position. I urge the Minister for Gender to sit up and ensure that the promise that the caretaker Minister, Madam Cecilia Dapa, made, that all caterers' arrears have been paid, should be paid because they were not paid. I also urge the Minister of Finance, who said in 2022 that in 2023, the feeding grant will be increased to reflect the current cost of living. That should be adhered to. And I also urge them to find means through MASLOC and the National Buffer Stock to be able to support the pre-financing program so that we can improve upon school feeding program and have a sense of motivation and appreciation for the caterers. So they will feel good about what they are doing. And when workers are happy, they will also produce good quality and nutritious food. And the children will be happy, the farmers will be happy, the traders, they buy the thing, everybody, the media, we will all be happy. And Ghana will be better for it. That is my involvement.
Finally from me to you, Madam Otiku Japa. When you just mentioned the caretaker minister, I just brought my mind to concerns about how the gender ministry itself has been treated. People felt that there was not much attention, the needed attention and focus and priority given to that ministry. Do you see that as a possible effect or trickle down to some of these issues like school feeding that affect the caterers, who are women largely, and the children who are at the heart of the program? Finally.
You're pushing me into politics. I said, let's stick to school feeding matters. The Ministry of Gender, like other ministries, is a very important area. It used to be called Ministry of Women and Children, so that we will focus on women and children. Now, it is the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. It is the house of the most vulnerable. It is the place where the voiceless are to be addressed. And the ministry needs to set up to fulfill its core mandate. If that is not done, Ghana will continue to be like the person who is running with one leg tied, because the vulnerable are more than those who are wealthy, and they will weigh the rest of the wealthy people down unless we increase their ability to also be wealthy. That is the whole idea of alleviating poverty and the sustainable development goals. The time has come for the Ministry of Gender to end the reason for which it was established. It has been asleep, in my opinion, for some time. It must wake up. It must wake up. I reiterate, it must wake up. The women of Ghana, the children of Ghana, need their services. Social protection should not be taken lightly. And for a developing country like Ghana, having 61.2% of our population being women, we need to let the women understand that gender equality is a right. Gender equity is a right. And issues that affect women must be handled effectively and meaningfully by the Ministry of Gender, so that the development of this country will be sustainable. I thank you. Have a good
Appreciate
day.
your time. Thank you so much. Otiko Afisa-Jaba is former gender minister, and she's been sharing her thoughts with us on the nationwide strike by school feeding caterers. She has worked with them before. Many of them have called on her. She says that she empathizes with them, and that's why she is appealing to those responsible to ensure that their demands are met. Well, it's now time for us to focus on students, Ghanaian students outside the country, precisely in Sudan, where a war has broken out. We just want to get a quick update on how they're doing. We'll do so right after this. To stay. Thanks for staying on the AM show. Let's now engage the National Union of Ghana Students, because it's been working with the government to evacuate Ghanaian students from Sudan. The Foreign Affairs Ministry says it's so far evacuated 2 batches of 50 and 27 identified Ghanaian nationals to safety in a different part of Sudan and not where the heart of the war is. Now, they will later be transported to the Ethiopian border, where they will be received by officials of the Ghanaian embassy there and processed for Ethiopian entry visas. Now, they comprise 34 females and 43 males. We understand they will later be brought home after all those processes are completed. Dennis Apiala Biampofo is NUG's president, and Alex Opong Checheku is NUG's Secretary International. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Because of how these things work, just a quick update. Are the numbers I mentioned still what we're working with currently, or you've been able to secure more Ghanaian students in terms of evacuating them from Sudan? Let me start with you, David.
Thank you very much. My apologies, I'm unable to join with the video very soon, a minute. But then, as it stands now, there's numbers still remain 77. Our numbers are still 77. We have all the 77.
Sorry, David, I'm really struggling to hear you. Dennis, rather, sorry. I'm really struggling to hear you. Can you please speak up?
Hello, please, do you hear me well? Can you hear me well, please?
Hello, Dennis. It's manageable.
Okay, so like just as I was saying before, fortunately and unfortunately, our number is still 77. We've not been able to add on because there may not necessarily be any addition to add on. Extensive information has gone wide to ensure that the numbers we have are most importantly all our students. So as it stands now, we have 77 in the care of the Ghanaian authorities, leading up to getting them home.
How many students are you aware of, Ghanaian students in Sudan?
We do not have a fixed number of Ghanaian students in Sudan because not all our students register with us when they enter a jurisdiction. So for some of them, they are there, they are learning, but they are not known until the crisis where everybody comes up to say, I'm a Ghanaian, and this is a proof that I'm a Ghanaian. It is difficult to know who and who are exactly the exact number of Ghanaians we have out there in Sudan.
Who had registered with Nukes International?
Hello?
Hello, Dennis. I'm asking if there's a known number of students who had registered with Nukes in Sudan.
The number is a fluctuating number, like I mentioned earlier before. It's a fluctuating number. You have a number around 50 who are known with you, but they are not even regular when it comes to the activities of the union out there in Sudan.
Right. And so are you suggesting in any way, or do you have any information that there could be more students than the number that have been evacuated so far?
Our checks and our analysis clearly indicates that it's likely that these are all our students in Sudan.
And these students, what level of education and what were they pursuing? Are you able to give us a rough understanding of who these people are and what they were studying in Sudan?
On the average, you have different programs. Most of them, my information is that they were Arabic students pursuing various degree programs in the study of Arabic. The various levels range from undergraduate to postgraduate, but most of them are postgraduate students. It ranges from first year, second year, third year, fourth year, and some in their postgraduate programs.
If Alex is on, Alex, you are Nukes secretary for your international arm. Tell us what it is like when students find themselves in places like these, and what the processes are in terms of having to evacuate them. We saw recently in Russia, now we're seeing in Sudan.
All right, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Perfectly.
Yes, so in situations like this, just like you rightly said, we've had cases like that from China to Ukraine, and then Russians, the invasion, and then now in Sudan. So in situations like this, the consul in the specific country where there is a problem or where students may have been affected, all of those students who reported to the consul on their arrival to that particular country are catered for by the data of the consul, and so they or reaching them is not as difficult as those who arrived and may not have their details captured by the consul or the embassy in the specific country. And what we do is that we reach out to the student union. You know, Nukes has an international relations arm where we cater for all of our students who are outside the country. So we try as much to reach out to the student arm there or the student leadership there to help in mobilizing the students or putting out contacts for our students who might be there but would not be in the reach of the embassy or the consul that exists in that particular country. So that was the case that happened in Ukraine, for instance, which is the most recent, this one, and then now in Sudan. So that is basically the roadmap in trying to evacuate some of these students from danger zones into safety.
I just want to understand, is it easier for you when students register, or in situations like this, you don't look too much to whether the person is a NUGS member or not? What are the protocols for you as NUGS when you have to help in the evacuation of students?
So for us as a union, it is our mandate to look out for the welfare of every student who is of Ghanaian descent. Right. And extends beyond just studying in Ghana to studying outside as well. Because if you look at the remit of the union's constitution, it embodies all of the students who are Ghanaians, and even to an extent for foreign nationals who study in our country. And so when issues of such nature happen, what we do is that we try as much as we can to reach almost everybody who's of Ghanaian descent. And the issue of whether they are a member or not does not really come in, because once they are Ghanaians and they are students, they are de facto, members of the union. And so we try as much to reach out to all of them. The challenge is that for most of the countries where we have not had in recent years constant communication with the students who study there, we've had issues with mobilizing students, especially in such times. And so that is the challenge that we have. But when the issues happen, as and when they happen, especially for countries where we had little or no information on how many students are there, who is the student leader there, and all of that, we are some way, somehow very swift in organizing just the contact, which may lead us to several other contacts where we may be able to find leadership for the students there, and then the evacuation process starts.
So you mentioned China, Ukraine recently, Russia as well, and now Sudan. What is this teacher NUGS? Because you just mentioned that you've not been in touch with students in some parts of the world, and it's been usually a struggle when you have to do some of these things. So what's the learning process for you here? What is NUGS going to do differently in terms of your international branches?
So what we've been doing differently for the last 1 year or the last 10 months has been that we have been establishing a consortium system where we are trying to gather data on our students who study outside. Not all of our students, we are trying to get data on leadership for students who study outside. And so when you go to the United Kingdom, when you go to US, we have student leaders there who in times like this, or in normal times when the union wants to reach out to students who study outside our country, we reach out through them. And I think that this is a plan that we intend to replicate in almost every other country where we may find Ghanaians. It will impress you to know that Ghanaians are very, very, very enthused about traveling, and especially exploring any other opportunities that they may find outside our country. And so we are trying as much. Unfortunately for us, the tenure of office is just a year, and so we may have to try and then replicate the system so well that those who take over from us would be able to continue with that, because these issues are not going to stop. That's not to say doom for the world, but the issues are not going to stop coming. And as much as we can, we have to pave the path for people to be able to, solve some of these situations in certain more easier manner, or more easier ways to help even the government to reach students, because there are students who might be in the reach of the union, but are not in the reach of the government because, just like I earlier said, or like the president stated, have not reported to a consul or an embassy ever since they got the country of study.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, and not to remind us of our pain, but it reminds me of the Christina Chu incident, where we had the Turkish ambassador saying that she wasn't even aware that he was in the country. So clearly these things point to the importance of why, as a Ghanaian citizen, try as much as possible, especially if you find yourself in places that have a history of war, or places that have a underlying political tensions, which could spark at any time, like what we've seen in Sudan. You just want to be sure that you are accounted for in case of an emergency. And you also mentioned that you reach out to people who are not your members, but can prove that they're Ghanaian citizens, i.e. they should be holding a Ghanaian passport, right? Or any other form of recognized identification, right?
Yeah, rightly so.
Right.
Rightly
So in a situation like this, if you're caught in a chaos and you cannot pick up your passport, for example, or pick up the Ghanaian ID that you have, and you haven't reported or made the consul aware, or whatever system is running that place aware that, oh, I'm a Ghanaian and I'm here, then it will be very difficult to account for you. But finally, Alex, so what's the big plan? Where are the students now? We're told they'll be taken to the Ethiopian border. There will be processes before they are brought back home. Do we know where they are currently in that process?
So yes, as of this morning, the information we have is that they are moving to Ethiopia from Gadaref in Sudan. So as of this morning, there are travel arrangements for them to get to Ethiopia safely. And then from there, just like you said, there will be further processes to get them back to Ghana. I mean, some of these processes include confirming the identity or nationality of the people who have been, as it were, brought to safety now. Because just like you rightly said, there may be people who may not even have the required documents to prove nationality, but they, one way or the other, have stuff that would be able to prove nationality. I mean, Ghanaians are not only Ghanaians by bearing cards. Yes, that is legally binding or legally proving that you are Ghanaian, but it is not exhaustive in itself in proving that one is a Ghanaian. And so all of those have to be followed, and then they'll take it up from there. But for now, the information I have for you is that they are on their way to Ethiopia from Gadaref.
Thank you very much, Alex Oponchuchukwu. He's NUG's Secretary, International Relations. Let me wrap up with NUG's President, David Labiampofo. Your line was quite bad. I hope it's better now. How easy or difficult was it in helping the Ghanaian officials in Sudan locate your students? And what will your last words be to Ghanaians who are studying abroad on how to go through all the checks and balances to ensure that in situations like this, they are safe and accounted for?
Thank you very much. My apologies for the breakages in my line early on. I think that it was not easy. Let me put that on record. It wasn't easy because if you don't have a good database and a registry, it is always difficult mobilizing your numbers. And so I'm sure we've all learned our lessons as young people and as Ghanaians who are outside the jurisdiction. We had to use all forms of unorthodox means, the people we know, the few ones we know, sending message from one person to the other in order to mobilize our people and ensure that we get everybody to safety. So it has been a lot of informal gathering for us at the National Union of Ghana students. But at least the joy is that every single one of them is safe, and then we are in constant discussions with them. This morning, like Alex mentioned, we are informed that they are en route to Ethiopia. It's been a stressful journey for them, I must say, as young people who are caught up in the anxiety and what have you. I'm hoping that going forward, everyone, not just students, every Ghanaian who lives their jurisdiction, especially to study and to engage in work purposes, will report to the consular or the embassy or the high commission or whichever system that runs, or associate with the rights organization or body mandated to do that. So for us at the National Union of Ghana students, we'll deepen our efforts, we'll deepen our work towards mobilization and a proper database management. But it is also to our people, our colleagues, to support us in this regard.
Please go ahead.
Beyond getting to the Ethiopian border, yesterday we met the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Director for Consular Services, Mr. Maucho Fiago, and then the Director of Public Affairs. We've established the necessary protocols post-evacuation, and then we are hoping that we will string together the various units and ministries to ensure that when our students are safe in Ghana, we would be able to have a proper rollout plan for them. when the date of their arrival is confirmed, we will surely communicate with your team at the multimedia.
And finally, I know you have a strong association in Ukraine, for example. I know there was a very vibrant one there. Which other countries do you have strong, vibrant news international associations?
Oh, I mean, we have quite strong in a lot of countries, in Hungary, in Russia, in UK, in US, in there are a lot of Germany, Italy, Spain. We have a lot of them. In South Africa, we have a very strong network of student groups there. We have a couple of them out there which are very strong. We are hoping that we can replicate it in China. We have a strong one in China too. Yeah.
I'm doing this because there may be Ghanaian students watching us from other parts of the world who may not be aware. So I want to believe Nukes has a website they can visit and get all the details so that they can get in touch. Thank you so much. Dennis Appiah Labiampofo is Nukes president. Then we were just discussing efforts to evacuate Ghanaian students caught up in that war in Sudan currently. And the good news is that they have been evacuated, and we believe that is all the students of Ghanaian descent who find themselves in Sudan. They have been evacuated en route to Ethiopia for forward repatriation to Ghana. Well, it's now time to give you some information on a really exciting program we have for you. When I say we, I mean this organization. And we'll be letting you in on the details right after this Tuesday. Thank you so much for staying on the AM show with me, Bernice Abubedu Lansah. Well, if you don't know, Multimedia Group says Christ at work. That's what we believe. And so every time we get the opportunity to show our appreciation to Christ and to God, we don't take it lightly at all. And that's why we have the Joy Corporate Worship, which will be happening tomorrow on the 28th of April at the Royal House Chapel, Ahimfie. And we have Celestine Donko and MOG. And right here, I am really excited and privileged to be hosting Reverend Mike Ni Apose. Good to have you, Rev. It's been a long... I haven't seen you in a very long time.
Too long a time. It's not Christianity at all. But hey,
yeah, tell us about Joy Corporate Worship.
Before I do, let me say a great thanks to God Almighty and to you as well and the team for actually having me.
Right.
I don't take you for granted at all. Let me quickly say that it is in the difficult moment or difficult challenges that our praises and thanks, worship to God means anything. Because when everything is going beautifully or perfectly, you can afford a laughter, you can afford a smile. You can just get around as if nothing is happening. But when you are in a difficult challenge or difficult situations like Ghana is going through and like the whole world is going through right now, this is the time that we need to bathe our souls in the word of the Lord, immerse ourselves into the name of the Lord. As the Bible says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and they are safe. And so we believe that as a corporate entity, we recognize the challenge that people are going through. But we also know that the Lord who brought us where we are today, by his grace, through COVID, through DDE, through whatever it is, he has sustained us, and he deserves all the praise and the glory, which is the reason why we're gathering ourselves together. When you check Psalm 50 and verse 5, God's word says, "Gather my people unto me, those who have a covenant with me by sacrifice." So as Joy, we have decided to be the ones gathering God's people. And we know God's people are everywhere, especially within the corporate institutions. We know that there are God's people there. God's people are here. You are God's child. You are God's child. Somebody else is God's child. And we are the ones doing the gathering from all walks of life. Let's come and appreciate the Lord for how far he has brought us. I was telling somebody, the last time, there are many people to today who even believe that there is no God. They are still arguing, the existence of God. Right. Some are doubting God ever exists and so on and so forth. But there is also a category of people who believe that if it had not been for the Lord, where would I have been by now? If, but for the Lord. And those are the people of God, scattered all over. And so if you are a child of God, you are a people of God, then you are the reason why we are gathering ourselves together. Multimedia believes in the grace of God. Like you said, Christ at work. Christ at work over here. And we believe that everyone we interface with, those we interact with, and those we do business with, if we believe that God is our success, we want to make sure that you have him as your success as well. So come, let's join our hearts together.
So we're putting everybody together, our audience, our clients, those who do business with us. And when you were talking about the different categories of people, and it just occurred to me that for many of you, this may be the program, or this will be the program that you get to experience and get to have that connection with Christ, because we're not only coming together for the sake of coming together, we are gathering, you said, unto
the Lord.
So he will be there.
He will be there.
Right.
I mean, the Bible says that God inhabits the praises of his people. So you come into the presence of the Lord with your praise or with a heart of gratitude. And I do the same wherever two or three are gathered in the name of the Lord is there in their midst. There's one thing I need to let me indicate that very quickly. David said in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me. There is the big he constantly in the mix. But then in the verse 4, it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Watch this. In spite of all God is doing, I am the one to walk. I am the one to go through the valley of the shadow of death. And I am not supposed to fear any evil, not because I'm strong, but because he is with me. Now, the people who would have God be with them are those who recognize to give him praise. In fact, you cannot refuse to recognize the big he and not be scared and not be afraid, because it is really scary.
It is.
It is really scary. I mean, think about it for a moment. It is really scary. But if you recognize the big he with you, you'll go through the valley, you go through a shadow of death, and you won't fear any evil. The hearts that are failing, you'll be exempt, because you have come and you want to give glory and praise to God Almighty. So basically, this is what it is. Everybody, friends in Fidelity Bank, friends at ABSA, friends at Met Insurance, friends at, now that I mentioned the banks, I have to mention everything.
Yes, EcoBank. friends at Stanchart.
Friends
at
Stanbic.
Everywhere.
GCB. Societe Generale. And of course, we have a couple of friends as well who we're doing business with. Originate, the guys that originate PL Properties and all that. Everyone.
DBS.
Everyone.
There's so many of you who do business with us all the time, and all of you must be there.
You must be there. I'm sure by this time you must be forming, small choir groups that you want to come and, use. We have a one song, So for example, I am in company A. What company can I mention right now?
Multimedia.
Multimedia. You know, we have one song to give glory to God. Okay, let's give them a microphone. Let's you know, it's an atmosphere of love, spontaneous worship, glory to God and everything. I believe we have to make it happen in a beautiful way. All roads will lead to IMF Royal House Chapel. Just at Obechebe Lamte Circle. And
there's a lot of space. Those of you who don't know the new oil dome, because some people may be worried, you know, that maybe it's huge. We can accommodate all of you, so please come in
your numbers.
Exactly, come with your family, come with your friends. It's a Friday. Let's ease into Saturday. You know, gently, no worries about too many engagements and all that. I know Saturday is busy for some of you, but at least you have some time to dedicate to God, free yourself. And then we will be worshiping. MOG and Celestine Donko will be leading us in worship.
Definitely. These are guys who are totally giving to worship. They are worshipers to a fault. I have encountered MOG. I've encountered Celestine Donko since 2012. Is it? Yeah. And I know that she has a heart to worship. You know, when she takes the stage, takes the microphone, you would worship. You just love the Lord, fall in love. And that's why we have chosen them to actually headline, what we're doing. But of course, apart from them, there are going to be other music ministers who are going to be leading us, for this wonderful time. You yourself, you may lead. You never know.
Yeah, spontaneous worship, like I said. So it's happening at the Royal House Chapel, Ahimfie. It's at Ahimfie. So please find your way there. It's at 6 p.m. It is our corporate appreciation. I was just having a discussion with someone yesterday about the relevance of meeting as a body of Christ in church, and he thought it was irrelevant. And I said, look, there's power in corporate things. There's power when we come together. And I illustrated it as, if you have a stick that is lighted, if I have a stick that is lighted and we come together and we put that fire together,
that's a huge
imagine fire. The fire we will create. And that's the purpose of coming together.
In 2 Chronicles chapter 5 and verse 13, the Bible says that, and they gathered together, and when they lifted up their trumpets and their musical instruments, and they began to sing. Here's the song they were singing: for he is good, and his mercies endureth forever. The Bible says that as they lifted up their voice, I think we can say this together: for he is good, and his mercies endure forever. The song goes like, for his mercies shall endure, ever faithful, ever sure. Oh yeah. Something of that nature. And the Bible says that, and the cloud of glory fell in that place, so that even the ministers were unable to stand on their feet. Do you know what that means? It means that flesh would give way to the spirit man to actually take over. And when the spirit man comes, it penetrates through walls that were hitherto close to you. You have no idea. God will make those ways happen. Why? Because you gathered together to give him praise and worship. And so, I can understand the people who say it's not important because they have not experienced it.
So come and experience it.
Just come experience it, and you have your personal testimony.
Right. Thank you so much, Asafa. I wish we could go on and on and on and on and on and on, because I love it anytime when we have these discussions. And is this a ticketed event? Do we need a ticket? No. We can just walk in.
Just walk in with a grateful heart.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's your ticket. A grateful heart.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to you, Osofo. Thank you so much for coming to tell us about the Joy Corporate Worship. On another day, when you were singing, I was like, wow, that's a nice voice.
On
another day, we'll talk about Osofo, and we'll talk about how he comes from a family of pastors and broadcasters. It's a very interesting. Should I mention it? No.
About the braids as well.
Yeah. And he's a very funky pastor. I saw him in braids a couple of months ago, and I was like, can you take it off?
Oh, Lord.
So we'll be here to talk about that as well. But thank you so much for all you do. God richly bless you.
Amen.
Come tomorrow and come and meet Rev.
Amen.
It will
Pastor Kojo will be there. Pastor Tuaka will be there. Pastor Albert Okran will be there. Look, everybody you know at Joy, everybody you know at Multimedia, the Adom guys and everybody's going to be there. So, of course, I also want to meet with you. There are people, recently I met somebody who had been listening to me for the past 15 years. And I was like shocked. He was telling me, you know, some sermons you preached that made me, can I mention your name, Mr. Charles Afo and the wife? I just did. Forgive me. I said, I promised, but yeah, I met them and they said, oh, some of the things you're doing, you know, you encouraged us. Right now we are giving to the orphanages. You know, we entered the Osu Children's Home, we've adopted, and we're doing, oh Lord, I was so dumbfounded. Yeah. And so I like to see people who had you know, been with us all these years, and you know, let's meet for the first time in the presence of the Lord. Yeah. I believe it's going to be a wonderful time.
And it's very important, you know, when we talk about meeting you, because we're reaching you by technology. We don't have you live. We know you were there. We know you were watching us, but it's always exciting when we meet and
let me hug you. Let me hug you.
Yeah, you know, let's feel your presence. Absolutely. So tomorrow we'll be expecting you at the Royal House Chapel in Fie. Rev will be there with the pastors you hear all the time on radio. And of course, with us, you know, because this is corporate, this is just about all of us. We are super grateful to you. You keep us in business, you watch us, you engage us as clients. And what better way than for all of us to come together to show appreciation to the one who makes it all possible, the giver of life, the one who makes it possible for all of us to be here to even interact in the first place. So join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. at Royal House Ahimfie as we give praise and glory to God. If you leave me, I can go on and on and on and on. When it comes to God, it's just exciting for me. Well, time won't allow us. We'll have to wrap up, but I'm super grateful, Benjamin and myself and the entire team, that you make time to join us every morning. God willing, we are back again tomorrow with an exciting edition of the AM show, definitely focusing on you and what matters to you. But up next is News Desk. Do stay for details. Take care.